Still the same. Okay, it is 4 o'clock. We will call the October 19th Salina City Commission meeting to order. I will ask staff for confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we will have roll call.
Mayor Hoppick.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Franz.
Here.
Commissioner Hodges. Here. Commissioner Ryan.
Here. Would those who are able please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we will move we have no awards and proclamations. We will move into the Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for individuals who would like to come forward and talk about something that is not on the agenda. We please ask you to limit your comments to 5 minutes. Please give your name and address if you come forward.
Commissioners, I don't
name please.
Salina. I don't see it on here, but there was something on the minutes that I read yesterday about you guys are trying to come up with a rule for tomorrow's meeting with no changing your policy on that. I don't think that would be a very bright idea.
Actually, that will be under 7.4, and it's not just about tomorrow's meeting, it's about all of our meetings, so. Any other comments? Okay, with that, we will move into public hearings.
Item 5.1, conduct a public meeting as a requirement of the Kansas Water Pollution Control Revolving Loan Fund project for improvements to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, according to requirements, this will be a public forum, so I will call that the public forum to order. And Martha, you.
Thank
Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Martha Tasker, Director of Utilities. And I do have some handouts if anyone in the public would like a copy. And would also like to get anyone in attendance from the public that's interested in the public meeting to put their name and address down. This is a requirement of the loan for the wastewater treatment plant project. Would anyone like a copy of the presentation? Sure, you want to read it, don't you? Pens over there. Carry too much. Trying to stay in the mindset of COVID-19 and trying to keep track of who's here at the meeting. The city has made a preliminary application to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment for a loan through the Kansas Water Pollution Control Revolving Loan Fund for the improvements at the wastewater treatment plant that we just spoke of in study session. And per Kansas administrative regulations and public participation, each loan recipient is required to conduct a public meeting during the preparation of the wastewater treatment plant feasibility study to talk about alternatives evaluated. Minutes are recorded and attendees are recorded. Thank you. And so the purpose of the public meeting is to provide the information to the public about the project, talk about the alternatives we've investigated, and to solicit any public comments. So ultimately, there will be a public hearing in April of 2021 where we'll discuss the actual project that's going to be built and the project costs and equipment to fulfill this public participation requirement. In my presentation today, talk about the existing wastewater treatment plant and the feasibility study, what its objective was. Talk about the last major wastewater treatment plant upgrade and what our discharge permits for wastewater at the treatment plant are, and nutrient removal alternatives that we're looking at in the future. And briefly on estimated costs, I'll talk a little bit about our current water and wastewater rates, get comments from the City Commission and the public, and then we'll complete our meeting. The wastewater treatment plant was first constructed in 1926. It was upgraded with primary clarifiers, trickling filters, and intermediate clarifiers in 1948. And again in 1961, kind of a parallel treatment process to what was constructed then. Typically, in a wastewater treatment plant, you have a liquid process and a solids process. And at our wastewater treatment plant, the liquid process discharges to the Smoky Hill River, and the solids process is with the digesters and the drying beds down in this corner. And that, the biosolids or land applied is either a liquid or a cake for beneficial use for the land. In 1979, maintenance building for wastewater collection. 1992, maintenance building for the wastewater plant. And then in 1993 was our last big upgrade to the treatment plant. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we move forward. In 1994, added a belt filter press to dewater the liquid biosolids to apply a more solid product to land application. The wastewater treatment plant is located at 596 North Marymount Road. It's rated as a 7.25 MGD facility, and as you've seen in the previous slide, it's been there for nearly 100 years, and it's had multiple upgrades over the last 95 years. The last major upgrade was in 1993. It was the activated sludge process that takes place in this area. These are the aeration basins, final clarifiers. And that process was added to reduce ammonia and the biological oxygen demand as the treated water reaches the receiving stream or the Smoky Hill River. Also included ultraviolet disinfection, which is located over on this side of the facility, and that disinfects the wastewater so that if public contact comes in place with the water in the river, it's been disinfected and it's safe for that body contact. And also final aeration. It's the last structure over in this corner of the facility, and it basically adds dissolved oxygen to the treated wastewater to enhance the river quality for aquatic life. This plant has been in service for about 30 years. The equipment's reached the end of its useful life. And since 2005, we've been receiving wastewater discharge permits from KDHE that's been giving a heads up that nitrogen and phosphorus removal is going to be required in the future. In 2007, we conducted a study to assess what it might cost to add nitrogen and phosphorus removal to the treatment plant. At that time, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment was really trying to get a feel for how many wastewater treatments across Kansas would need this process and what it might cost to do it. In 2015, we got a permit, and also an individual from KDHE came out and did a pilot study at our wastewater treatment plant to see if there were some operational changes that we could make to improve nutrient removal at our existing facility. We were not successful. Our current treatment plant is just not designed for nutrient removal. And so when we received our 2020 National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, or wastewater discharge permit, which identifies what we can discharge into the Smoky Hill River, it included total nitrogen of 10 milligrams per liter and total phosphorus of 1 milligram per liter. Excuse me. So in the feasibility study that was started in 2016 and completed as a final draft in 2017, there's basically a list of 9 alternatives that could be potentially looked at to meet nutrient removal. There's really 3 potential treatment processes, and they're either enhanced by adding to our activated sludge process by adding different zones with or without air in a treatment sequence, or integrated fixed film activated sludge, which is basically where you add some fixed or free-floating media in the activated sludge basins to give more area for the biology to grow, or a membrane bioreactor, which is similar. It's a combination of membrane and conventional activated sludge. And with these options, we looked at whether we keep the primary clarifiers in service or without primary clarifiers. Or do we look at biological phosphorus removal, or do we use chemical removal? So these 3 major treatment processes turn into 9 alternatives to look at. Excuse me. And at the end of the evaluation, and we looked at it kind of what we call a triple bottom line, where we look at economic, environmental, and social aspects and determine, what's our most cost-effective method. Economic is more about the capital cost, staffing, constructability, expandability. Environmental is a performance reliable? Is it a proven experience? Social is about how hard is it to permit? What's the public perception and safety? But as taking all of those into effect, we determined that a conventional 3-stage biological or 3-stage activated sludge with a 3-stage reactor was our most cost-effective, with the primary clarifiers and with biological phosphorus removal. Operator familiar with the conventional operation. It's a well-established process. We've had a similar process for 30 years, and there's a lot of competition in completed for providing the materials. The overall cost of the project for nutrient removal in 2016 dollars was $27 million. And it's the conventional 3-stage reactor with primary clarifiers and biological phosphorus removal. Equipment replacement was roughly $5 million, and we looked at what equipment will need to be in service to meet the 2020 permit, and based on which structures and which equipment will have a purpose with our new design, we felt it made more sense to wait on that plan until the final design phase was determined in the spring or April of 2021. This is not a requirement of the loan, but I thought I would put in a little bit about the rates, because that's kind of important to everyone. And the finance director and I work on water rates, sewer rates roughly in November of every year. And what I put on here is the projection. It's our 2020 budget and the projection for the next 4 years. Basically, we're looking at about a 3.5% annual increase over the duration of this time. We're just now in the process of making that review. I don't know that we've determined where we stand, but soon we will. But based on this information, a combined water and wastewater bill, if you use about 2,000 gallons a month, which is a very conservative person, the combined bill in 2020 is roughly $36.93, and in 2024, 5 years later, it would be $42.38 based on this 3.5%. If you are a user that uses 8,000 gallons of water, 6,000 gallons of wastewater, it's roughly $92.40 to $106, or a $13.63 increase over 5 years. So those are the rates that you've seen last November and just carried over into here. And as far as the wastewater treatment plant improvements, we've had them in the capital improvement program for several years. Currently, in 2020 through 2022, we have an interest payment of $125,000 a year. And we're looking at the interest rate of about 4%. I believe with the state revolving loan fund will be more in the range of something less than 1.5. And ultimately, from 2023 through 2042, or a 20-year payback time, we'll be looking at slightly over $2 million for the annual payment for principal and interest. And so that really kind of gets me through the quick order of the feasibility study, and be willing to answer any questions the governing body might have.
One question, that 3% per year is all the way through 2042?
No, we've only looked at this, we look at a 5-year increment at a time is basically what we prepare and show to you. So in this November, we'll be going to year 2025. Now, Debbie and I do look out farther. I think she's back there. We do look out farther, but each year we go back and look at how much water did we utilize, what are our costs, and look at actual costs and take a look at it every year. We don't make the assumption it's going to stay that way. So each year
if there were
we
no
look at
other
it.
large projects on the horizon, at what point does that 3% increase generate enough money to comfortably pay this all the way through 2042? I know there will be other big projects, but
I don't know
well,
if
we're
I have.
fixing everything now. There might not be, but
Well, we're getting close, at least on my part, for water and wastewater. We have a new water plant and that, but there's always maintenance to do and water main replacements, but at least for now, and Debbie, if you feel different, please interject. We have tried to look at all of the future projects that we're aware of and have put those intact here, from the water main replacements to our standard sub-CIP improvements that we do yearly. So I don't know of a big project, but
because if you give 3% long enough, it will start generating pretty large bills.
well,
Yeah.
that's why we look at it every year, is to determine what do we really need to do with the rates to be able to meet our obligation for expenditures. We look at revenues and expenditures, and we do try to look out into the future so that we don't have a rate shock of all of a sudden we need 20% increases. You've heard in some other communities for water and sewer improvements, we try to avoid that.
Your question was phrased very specifically and very well, in that it would be a future project that would cause that need. This model gets the debt service in place over the life of that debt. It's a function of what else might come along, and then part of our planning process is try to balance out debt that's paying off so that it frees up some revenue to fund another project. But we're trying to be mindful of what we know are the pressing projects at the moment, not anticipating a lot of projects of this size, and then the ongoing water main replacement's the one that we're trying to pay attention to.
We have those allocated at paying from cash from our operating fund at $2 million a year.
But just to be clear, to support this debt won't require 3% increases annually for the life of the debt. This will get that funding stream in place, and we'll be able to make the payment going forward.
Thank you. I don't mean to interject, but that was my follow-up to Commissioner Davis's question was, in the absence of other projects, then we would look at that 3.5% annual increase, hopefully stabilizing, so that we aren't looking at 3.5% year after year after year.
Correct. Every year, we look at our revenues and our costs and
Right,
develop
and-
what we need. So
right.
that's our goal, is to not have an increase unless it's warranted by the project costs or cost of living, whatever. But we try to be mindful of that every year.
Utilities, material supplies are things that aren't necessarily a new project, but we have to factor that in as well, any cost increases we might see there.
Chemicals are a big cost in our operation at our water plant. And so we're kind of at the mercy of fuel, products, piping varies with piping costs, concrete costs, all vary based on whatever's happening in the rest of the industry, from hurricanes to tornadoes to you name it, and all of those things seem to have a little bearing on us. So, but we try to be mindful each year and take a look, but I just wanted to give you what we've kind of forecasted for the next few years to kind of cover that base, so it's,
And-
I know you've seen it before, it's just wanted to bring it back and show you one more time in association with this project.
I appreciate it. And just one last follow-up. You had indicated KDHE was the one that ranked these projects in terms of necessity of completion. They wanted to see the South Wellfield plant dealt with prior to
Yeah.
our wastewater treatment plant.
Basically, for us, and the size of our community and the size of our staff, it would be incredibly costly to try to deal with those two projects at the same time and to manage them. So in discussions with them, they felt our drought condition, and of course, 2006, 2007, 2012 were all times when drought was pretty significant in our community for, as far as surface water. So that was a point, and they've been involved with all of the studies and the evaluations that have been done over the past several decades about water supply. So it was a balancing act of looking at all of the rates and how this all fits together and trying to put it together in a plan that's affordable for our community.
Any other questions from the commission? Are there any comments from the public?
Norman Mann with Salina. Can't we remove all the phosphorus from the water? Oh. Why not?
We can remove different levels of phosphorus. It's all about the cost. And we talked about enhanced phosphorus removal, dropping it down to 0.5 instead of 1. That's definitely a chemical process, and there's other communities, and Jessica might add more, but have much lower limits than 0.5. So yes, you can drop it lower, but it's about cost, and it's all about what do we need to do for the Smoky Hill River that we discharge into. They look at total maximum daily loads in that river and determine what can each input put into the river and stay in check with the water quality that's necessary. That's the short story of a long story.
Dalton McDowell, Salina. Would this project here cause our taxes to increase again?
The water and sewer rates pay for the cost of all
Martha,
of
you
these
might
upgrades.
talk into the speaker, I'm sorry. So that they can hear.
The water and sewer rates pay for all of the utility costs. We're not sales tax or property tax. Does not provide any of our funding. It's all about the rates that we talked about here.
Okay, any other public comments? Okay. Okay, with that, I will close the public forum. Thank you. Any further?
I think that concludes what we need to do on KDHE's behalf today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. With that, we will move into the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of October 12th, 2020.
Okay, do we have any additions or deletions? If not, I would accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda 6.1. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. That moves us into administration.
Item 7.1, authorize sale of general obligation improvement and refunding bond series 2020-B. 7.1A, receive report on bids received. 7.1B, second reading ordinance number 20-11041, authorizing the issuance and delivery of general obligation improvement and refunding bond series 2020-B. And 7.1C, resolution number 20-7888, prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of general obligation improvement and refunding bond series 2020-B.
Good afternoon,
Ms. Pack.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. Back on September 28th, City Commission approved and gave us authority to go out for public sale for general obligation bonds and set this date, October 19th, as the date of that sale. As part of that process, we did put out a preliminary official statement and notice of sale to prospective bidders. We did not have to go through a bond rating call with Moody's because we had just been through one in March when we issued bonds back in the spring. However, we did have to do some updating of our financial information, and they did put out a new rating on us, which confirmed our rating at AA3, which was what we held before, which is good news in this time of coronavirus and unknown revenues and things like that. So we were pretty happy with that. These bonds actually have two purposes. The first purpose is refunding 3 sets of debt that we currently have. The first one is the 2010B bonds, which we're refunding $760,000. The 2012A bonds, which we're refunding $1.2 million. And a Kansas Department of Health and Environment loan, water loan for $3.615 million. We're also adding new funding with this issuance, $2.1 million for the radio project, $860,000 for the Quint, and $480,000 for SCBA for the fire department. At the time that we issued this blue sheet, we thought the savings would be about $379,000. After our numbers came in today, that actual savings turned out to be about $323,000, which is still pretty significant. It's 5.73% savings for that refunding. So overall, we're pretty happy with those numbers. I do have Dave Arterberry here with Stiefel Nicholas that I'm going to ask him to come up and kind of give you just a scenario of what the bids were, who they were, and what those rates were that we got from this bid today.
Thank you, Debbie. And again, David Arterberry with Stiefel Nicholas. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. First of all, I did want to touch briefly on something Debbie had mentioned about the rating. As she said, in this time and in this economy, simply being able to maintain your existing bond rating should be viewed as a real positive. Moody's, in their report that they prepared, did mention specifically the city's efforts over the last few years to rebuild your fund balances as a real positive. So just please keep that in mind going forward in future budgets, that those fund balances are something that the rating agencies really do focus quite a bit on. As far as the results of the sale today, we ended up taking bids up until noon. Broadly, the municipal bond market is, we're not quite at historic lows in terms of interest rates. We probably hit that sometime back in the early to mid part of September, but we're not too far from the lows. We're probably up about a tenth or 0.15% above those lows that we reached back in September. We ended up, today when we took bids, I ended up getting 2 bids. Typically, we would like to probably see something more in the range of 4 to 5 bids, but what's happening in the market is there's a tremendous supply of bonds right now going into the market as issuers try to sell their bonds in advance of the election. I think there's some concern about turmoil in the market and, potential volatility. So that's causing a little bit fewer bidders than historically we've seen. Last week, as an example, Johnson County sold bonds for their Public Building Commission, and they also received 2 bids on their sales. The bids that we got was, one was from R.W. Baird and Company, and they had a group in their that submitted their bid that consisted of not only them, but United Missouri Bank and Commerce Bank and Country Club Bank, some real big purchasers of municipal bonds in this region. They bid an interest rate of 1.57823%. The other bid was submitted by Huntington Securities at a rate of 1.776147%. We reviewed the bids. The bid submitted by Baird, which was the lower interest rate, was mathematically correct, and it met all the bidding parameters. After we received their bid, typically what we do is we resize the bond issue based on their bid. And after we did that, the principal amount of the issue went from $9.06 million down to $8,450,000. That's just a function of how they prepared and submitted their bid. We were able to reduce the size of the issue. And as Debbie mentioned, the total savings was approximately $323,000. The old debt that was refinanced had an average rate on it of about 2.694%. And when it was refinanced, the new rate is on the refinanced debt is about 1.44%. Honestly, if you ever asked me in the past if I thought we would be refinancing debt that carried an interest rate of 2.69%, I probably would have said I would never think it would happen. But obviously it can in this rate environment, and it did. So obviously welcome any questions you might have or anything related to the sale or the market.
Questions? One quick question I had is the possible net savings is less. Is that due to the interest rate being a little bit higher or because of the sizing of the bond, or both?
No, it's due simply to the interest rate being about a tenth or a 0.15% higher than before, yeah.
Not complaining about 1.578, whatever.
No,
it's
hard to
believe it could be much less.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So the change in the value of the bonds from 9.06 to 8.45 million, did that happen on the refunding side or on the new money side?
It was a combination of both.
Okay.
Both pieces. The premium they bid on the bond issue was about $600,000, and that was a mix from all the different purposes, yeah.
Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay. Thank you, Dave.
There are 2 items of action today before you. First is ordinance 20-11041. There's 4 options that we bring before you. To approve ordinance 20-11041 on second reading, authorizing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $9,060,000 principal amount of general obligation improvement and refunding bond series 2020B. To approve that ordinance on second reading with amendments as you deem appropriate, postpone consideration of that to a specific time and date, or to vote to deny it, which would result in us not being able to issue these bonds and possibly losing the savings that we did, and having to find alternative funding for the new projects that we have available. Staff recommends option number 1. And then resolution 20-7888 is prescribing the form and detail of authorizing the delivery of these bonds. There again, you have the option to approve with amendments, to postpone, or vote to deny that resolution. And staff again recommends option number 1. I will note, these resolutions and bonds have been adjusted to the new numbers that we got today from the copies that you got yesterday to the new 8.4 million and those numbers, so.
I was going to say, on the ordinance, it says not to exceed. On the resolution, it just says delivery of 9,060,000. Does that number need to be changed on the resolution?
Yes, it has been. I have new copies today that, we didn't know what the number was. We were
Right.
starting with
But when we
9,060,000.
make our motion, do we need to use the new number
Yes.
on the resolution?
Yeah,
I would
would be
think.
best to do that, yes.
I was going
And
to ask, or
that
can we just
number is-
reference the
What's that?
resolution
And that number is?
8,450,000 is what I had.
Yes.
I wasn't sure if you had it.
The ordinance, I believe we're okay because it says not to exceed, or should that be adjusted also?
No, I think it's fine.
Yeah, it's probably fine.
Because it says not to exceed?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, any public comment? I don't believe there was. I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mr. Mayor, move we approve ordinance number 20-11041 on second reading.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We will, to approve ordinance number 20-11041. We will have roll call.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Franz?
Aye.
Commissioner Hodges?
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan?
Aye.
Mayor Hoppick?
Aye. Ordinance number 20-11041 passes 5-0. Moves us to resolution number 20-7888.
Mr. Mayor, move approval of resolution number 20-7888, prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of $8,450,000 principal amount of general obligation improvement and refunding bond series 2020-B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 20-7888. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That also passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That's good news. That will lead us to 7.2.
Item 7.2, Salina Fieldhouse reopening plan.
Mr. Shealy.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Travis Shaley from the Salina Parks and Recreation Superintendent. I'm here today to propose a modified opening approach for the Salina Fieldhouse. Before I do, I just wanted to recap a few things, take you back in time a little bit, and then to our current status. Back in March of 2020, you guys were faced with some difficult decisions, and that were to discontinue part-time staff and recreation programming. With the closing of the Salina Fieldhouse, we did have an exception there with tournaments of 30 plus. And then, if you recall, during the summer of 2020, we did have a modified version of our youth baseball and softball league, and that was conducted by a volunteer group called IFA. And then we did have some tournaments that occurred in June and July as well. Then we moved on to August 3rd. You guys voted to allow recreation staff to program outdoor soccer, and that was with part-time staff and being reimbursed by the MidCADS' United Soccer Initiative. And at that time, you voted to delay the indoor futsal for future discussion. And so I'm back to you with that. And plus, we've had quite a bit of inquiries from the public to open the Salina Fieldhouse. So I'm here to prepare a modified approach to you. I want to the inquiries or the user groups, a lot of them, Winter's Farmers Market, if you guys been involved with that, it's on Tuesday afternoons, evenings. They do transition from outdoors to indoors into the Salina Fieldhouse. And Kansas Westland, they utilize the facility tremendously. They do have a baseball academy that usually occurs November through December, and then starting in January, they're in there every day, and so is the softball team. They utilize the facility a lot. South and Central, they did get a hold of me during this fall. It was more or less for the inclement weather times. with football and soccer. They do utilize the Fieldhouse for softball for their winter workout starting in January as well. Sharp Performance has contacted us, and they utilize the facility anywhere from a tunnel for pitching lessons to batting lessons to reserving the whole facility for their combine. They do have a big combine that occurs in the spring, and we do have a proposed one for unsigned seniors this late winter, I believe it is, as well. Smoky Valley Home Educators, that's the homeschool group. They, starting last year, they utilized the facilities more of their home base, as you will, for their volleyball, and then their 4 teams of basketball, middle school boys and girls, high school boys and girls. We've had good rapport from them. They like to be in the facility at all one time, and that's been a good deal. Kansas State Youth Soccer Association, they have a program called ODP. It's a development for soccer players that occurs on Friday evenings. They've contacted us. And then the Salina Liberty, they've contacted as well, Coach Flax. Their usage is more in that late February time, and then going into the summer. When the Tony's Pizza Event Center is not available, they utilize the Fieldhouse for their practices. All the tournament directors, and I'll get to those here soon, they've all contacted us to see what the status is of the Fieldhouse. And then the bulk, as far as the number-wise, the baseball, softball, volleyball, basketball, soccer coaches, you name it, they utilize the facility starting in November, and it gets more in December, and then really when January hits, there's a lot of groups and teams in there. I happen to visit the Fieldhouse from time to time, make sure it's doing all right, and walked in the concessions area. Happened to look over at one of our telephone, and 3,298 missed calls since we've closed the Salina Fieldhouse in late March. So there is some interest there. Modified approach includes 3 things. 1, open the Salina Fieldhouse for rentals within modified hours, November through December. Second one is to program indoor futsal with part-time staff, November through December. And the third is continue a similar approach with the tournaments and events moving forward into 2021. I did want to mention that all 3 of these, we did have prepared COVID requirements and guidelines that I had in your packet for you. The first one is modified hours. We are proposing to modify our hours. In a normal world, we open at 9 a.m. and then on some evenings we close at 10, 11, depending on the rentals. We're proposing to open at 2 and close at 10. This will allow our existing full-time staff to supervise all the opening hours. And that includes programming, rentals, events, and tournaments during November and December. And there's no part-time staff supervision needed during this time of November and December. What this will do is it'll lower that cost, the utility costs. Obviously, we'll shave in about 5 hours off of operations. You know, in a normal world, we do open at 9, and this we're open at 2. So it will shave off some utilities, and it will also shave off the part-time payroll that we usually have during this time. What it'll also allow is the buildings maintenance staff. In a normal world, they come in at 5, and they're not done really by the time we get there. So it would allow them more time and maybe come in a little bit later to properly sanitize the facility and do their normal field and equipment maintenance. The second one is indoor futsal, and nothing would really change here. We do operate this program normally November through December. We do have our full-time rec staff member who supervises all the games, and we have part-time staff as officials. The only thing that would change would be the same thing that was approved for outdoor, and that's the Mid-Kansas United Soccer Initiative will reimburse all the officiating costs. We estimate that around $1,200 by the year end of 2020. And you've seen this before. This was in the last presentation. That's just a letter stating as such that they will reimburse all officiating costs. You've also seen this as well. I know how you look at financials. And so here in the, there's my pointer. Here in the 2019 actuals, those were the actual expenses during 2019. And then this is what we propose would happen in 2020. As you can see, we have all the goals that we need. This is the part-time staff that would be reimbursed, so I did put a 0 there, and the assigning of referees. So that's where you come with an estimate about $1,200. $200 is, we have all the equipment that we need, but in case a ball blows up or something like that that we can't foresee, I would just like a little cushion in there at least. So, but then you go to the right side of there of revenues. Here were our actuals. We do offer adult futsal program, U9 through U14, and then we do have a high school as well. And those were our actuals, and this is what we propose. And then last year's cost recovery was right here. Now, when you factor in some indirect costs, so that was tough to do. What I did is just apply what we would charge a user group for that space usage. So we did apply that. And then if you don't have a program, you don't have futsal rentals. So if we do have a program, then we have these proposed futsal rentals right there. So with direct and indirect costs, we're in that neighborhood where we need to be by our cost recovery model. Expenses, this was a tough one. I was trying to figure out a way for you guys to understand that I was just basing it on our current expenses. And right now, we have recreation full-time staff salaries, which I thank you, by the way. And we have some stagnant Fieldhouse bills. So with the facility still sitting there, we do incur a few bills sitting there. But so I tried to go and with our proposed additional expenses beyond that for November and December, our referees, again, those would be reimbursed at the end. So that would kind of zero out. Futsal equipment, just give us a little leeway to run the program. So we're not over there cleaning or have any custodial as of right now, but we would have that. I got with buildings maintenance, and that's our estimate of additional cleaning and custodial for November and December. Again, we would schedule the HVAC system to be occupied a little bit during those times. So we're estimating about $1,000 additional from where we're at per month. So times 2 months would be $2,000, and that's how we came up with the $5,080. And again, $1,200 of that estimated would be reimbursed. Moving on to the third one is tentative 2020 and 21 events. This is tentatively what we have on the books as of right now. As you can see, there's a lot of events. And every single one of these, I've spoken to a lot of these directors. Believe me, they're calling me, you know, what the status is. And they very much understand that COVID dictates everything, and depending on your decision, okay? They understand that. The next column is an estimated number of teams. We came up with this. We've got some decent history on some of these tournaments because they've occurred since we opened. Some of them are new. So we estimated the number of teams that would be in each tournament. And then if you notice, some of those do follow below the 30-team threshold that we do have right now. The next column, and I know that exercise we went through with baseball and softball, your interest was economical impact. So I did get with Visit Salina. Based on these estimated number of teams and historically with the tournament, we came up with an estimate, and I want to emphasize estimate here. So we don't exactly know how many out-of-town teams and everything. We don't know those actuals until after the tournament occurs. So that is an estimate, but it's dialed in pretty good. The ones in red, those are based on participants, not the number of teams. So I did include those. Those are some high-impact events. And then, so I did that down here at the participant base. So they didn't have total into the team factor, but I did have them in red right there. So, and I included those in the estimated impact as well. We wouldn't propose any of this without any COVID guidelines. We do understand that. So I kind of became a research guy. I got with the Kansas State High School Activities Association. They provide a lot of COVID guidelines, requirements, and it's constant changing. I want to emphasize that. I attended a meeting last week, and that Monday there was 5 new guidelines that came out within CASIA. So it's constantly evolving. But I also went to some other facilities that was about the same as the Fieldhouse. Johnson County has a facility. Lawrence Sports Pavilion, it's more rock chalk, their center there. And then the YMCA in Wichita, it's Farha. And then the Kansas State Youth Soccer Association. So I gained a lot of things from them, and about 95% of them was about the same, just different language, but about the same. So got some good research there. So what I did is I got with Jason Tiller with the Salina County Health Department, and he reviewed those. He did recommend taking temperature when entering the facility. Now, I caught this, and I want to correct this. Not currently staffed to provide this function. I believe we are during November and December. So I wanted to make that correction there with our full-time staff, no part-time additional, but we can perform this function in November and December. We started at the drawing table, and then it was recommended to have these in sections, and thought it was a great idea of requirements versus guidelines. So requirements are something that we can enforce. You know, the mask ordinance, the social distancing, the requirements KDHE comes, we can enforce those. All these up here, they also listed as guidelines, just recommendations to follow. So if you, hopefully you reviewed the recommendations put forward to you in the packet, we kind of separated them into user groups, parents, players, coaches, tournaments, and my vision there was to give a sheet of paper to every single person who utilizes that field house. And that pretty much covers them all right there. All those facilities that I mentioned, Lawrence Sports Pavilion, Rock Chalk, they're all different. This Rock Chalk, they're unique. Their facility is open to every single Lawrence citizen. Right now, they're closed to the public, okay? They have a track, they have some cardio, they have some weightlifting, I believe, that's open to the public, which we do not. But right now, that option for Lawrence citizens is not available. It's closed. But they are open for rentals. They have programming going on, and I found this interesting, that they must wear a mask even during heavy activity, okay? YMCA, New Century Fieldhouse, that's in Gardner. They were open for all activities and rentals and programs, wear a mask in the facility, and then once you step on the court or once you start engaging in physical activity, then you are allowed to take the mask off. This is identical to what Keisha has right now. I do have a daughter playing volleyball, so she's on the bench, has the mask on. Once she goes onto the court, she takes the mask off. So that's pretty common. So the operations across the board are different from facility to facility, but the only consistency that I found is these facilities are open. With that being said, staff recommends to concur with staff's recommendations to resume the modified operation of the Salina Fieldhouse, subject to proposed COVID requirements and guidance. Option 2 is to postpone consideration of reopening the Salina Fieldhouse to a specified date and time, and then provide staff direction regarding additional information or amendments to the City Commission would like to request for further consideration. Or option 3 would be vote to keep the Salina Fieldhouse closed November through December. With that, I'll bring it back to commission.
Okay, questions from commissioners?
Just have a few. Are there any provisions for open play like basketball, pickleball, anything that citizens before COVID would like come in the evening if the courts were open and shoot around?
Before COVID? Are you asking before COVID?
No,
or-
no, I mean, well, like it was before then, but are there any provisions, if the courts aren't being used, where citizens can come in and just shoot around on a basketball court?
It is not included in this recommendation, no.
Is that for staff?
Staffing.
Okay. And as far as the guidelines on paper, I would hope they'd be sent out to each coach to distribute to each team or family or however.
Yes.
Way before they even think
Yes.
about packing a bag to come.
So if they were to register for a program, our software can attach that to the registration. We can get that to the coaches. We know the coach's email. We know all the participants' emails. The tournament directors, I can email all of those. We can place it on our website, social media. We can do anything with that document.
Okay. And as far as the temperatures, with the infrared forehead jobs, they don't really take very long. I mean, it certainly would take less time than going through your bag going into the Royal Stadium or the Chief Stadium. I mean, it's
Sure.
because there will be a lot of younger people who unfortunately will be sick and runny nose and temperatures anywhere during the fall or in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And you won't know who's sick with what. So it's a quick, easy way to screen them out. You could probably get volunteers to sit there. All they have to do is beam it off somebody's forehead.
And I have some quotes for the manual ones, not too expensive. I do have a quote for an automated machine. It's $1,800 or so. You have to put your wrist underneath there, but you would still need someone to man the gate, because all they would do, some of them would just go around. This is what I've seen at Acacia events.
Beats taking care of them a week later in the hospital.
Concur.
I think we could probably get some volunteers to do that.
Good.
I had understood from the presentation that you do now have the staff to do the temperature checks.
We can do that November through December. That is
Okay.
correct.
And my question was, are we going to do that? You never really addressed that.
We can, if you give us approval to proceed.
Or direction to proceed.
Did you?
I'm done, I'm sorry, thank you.
And with the exception of the futsal, we do stay within the part-time, discontinue of part-time with that exception. We can do everything else with full-time staff.
Just following up on the questions that Commissioner France and Commissioner Davis asked regarding taking temperature and screening in that fashion, I mean, my direction would be, I would like to see that required of anyone entering the field house. I did have a couple questions regarding the COVID-19 requirements and guidance document that you provided. I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see consequences to not following the requirements. And if we're going to require this, I think that we need to make it abundantly clear, and maybe, like I said, maybe that's in here, but I think we need to make it abundantly clear that if you cannot, you claim that you cannot wear a mask or you're not wearing it correctly, and you don't remedy that, that you will be asked to leave, whether that's a coach, a player, a parent, that we make that abundantly clear that, mask wearing is a prerequisite for being able to enter the building and to participate in any activity within the building.
Okay.
The other question, or something I noticed that seemed like it was a little, kind of two messages. In one place, under requirements, it says that players may take off their mask while engaged in activity, but must wear their mask while on the bench and elsewhere through the facility. And then under guidelines for players, it says that wear a face covering before and immediately after all practices and games. And I thought that we might want to make sure that we're saying the same thing both places, because if mask wearing is expected when a player is on the bench or not actively participating, I think, with anybody, it's helpful if you just keep that consistent. The only time that they take their masks off is when they're actively participating. And if it's before, if it's after, if it's when they're on the bench, they're expected, it's required that they wear their mask.
What I can do is take that language from the requirement.
Yeah, exactly. That's just a copy and paste thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And two other things. I guess I just had a question. On the sports-specific guidance, basketball was specifically called out in terms of being wiped down before each game at halftime and after. Will volleyballs, because volleyballs get handled a lot too.
In reality, that does happen. I can put it in there, and I can put it in there.
I just thought if you were going to call one specifically out, that you might call it out, then, call it out for all. That was just,
I can do that for all sports.
yeah, that the equipment's going to be, wiped down at specific intervals or whatever. And then my final question is, and I'd forgotten that we had the software to get people to register. Now, when you have somebody that's like registering for a tournament or whatever, is it just like, say, the coach that registered, or does each individual participant, are they required to register through the software individually?
If it's a team registration program, the coach supplies, he gathers all the information from the players' parents, and then he registers. So he would get that email that say whatever the registration fee was, he would get that email. But what we want to do is take that a step further and get those team rosters and submit it to each individual when possible.
I love that idea. I think that's fantastic. And I'm sure that your software allows for this, because I'm just thinking back to, I've helped other people with team software, is that we can make a document that literally requires the coach to either initial or to check after each thing, I acknowledge that that there's this expectation, that there's this expectation, that there's this expectation. And I would love to see that, an acknowledgement that I have read and I understand the parameters for the participation with Salina Parks and Recs Department within the Salina Fieldhouse. And that way I also feel like we and staff can say, you checked the box, you typed your initials in the box, did you not read it? Because we're asking for you to acknowledge that. And I think that it just provides staff with a little bit of leverage in that, that they've at least had to scroll down and checking the boxes and accepting our terms.
Back in the olden days, before computers, I guess, we had a coach's code of ethics, and I made them sign it, and I put it in my book, and if they were acting inappropriately, I showed it to them, and same concept.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I do believe I spoke with Jeff, our deputy director. Our civic rec system is capable of doing this.
Yeah, I can't remember what the name of the platform that I was building things on at one time for Sharp Performance, but yeah, we could get as specific as we wanted to. I think it was a Dick's Sporting Goods platform or something, but.
On the tournament piece, I would be able to get it to that tournament director, and then they distribute our COVID guidelines to the teams. And then when they enter the facility, those mask requirements, those things that we built, those requirements, what I've done is put them on those A-frames before they're walking into the facility, or as they're walking in the facility, they know before entering in the facility what's expected of them.
Right. I mean,
and I've done that in the past.
I just feel like we can't get that message across too often. I mean, any chance that we do have. And then the final, I realized there was one more thing I'd highlighted. Under one of the points, it said that spectators were going to be limited. Oh, the guidelines for all users on the first page. Spectator numbers should be limited to a maximum of 2 spectators per event. Is that 2 spectators per participant, or?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I was like, well, that's bold. We're just getting the first 2 parents in the door are going to be the ones who get to watch.
Maybe
We'll
when
be
I was
camping out for days.
modifying this, I left that out, but I will add that per
Okay,
participant.
cool.
Okay.
As a clarification on that particular point, that is a guideline, not a requirement.
About the number of participants.
Correct.
I'm wondering if we don't do something where it's like, you said you were going to have places marked off.
Yes, I can mark on the
Mark the
benches. What we did this summer, we had shields. We closed the drinking fountains so they can only use the water bottle option only. We designated home and visitor teams, so those home teams were sitting kind of together, not together, but in that vicinity.
Right.
And then the visiting teams were down the way a little bit. We already implemented things like that,
Right.
just to help with that social distancing.
And I guess the only thing I would just ask us to think about is, if we do designate that these are the appropriate spaces to sit, because I'm just telling you, you'll get people saying, well, the 4 of us, we're a family, so we can sit together, and then it messes the whole spacing thing up.
It does.
So, just you and staff might kind of talk through strategies for what to do when the stands are full and you've got, 50 angry parents and grandparents out there saying, well, so you're going to punish me because I couldn't be here an hour before the game starts or whatever.
Understand.
Because, I think you guys are going to get some grief on that.
Sure.
So that's all I have.
Although they can watch it on television. The
We-
TVs are operable?
That helps, really. Yeah. Out in our lobby, and especially those mothers chasing around a 2-year-old, and we don't allow food or drink inside unless it's sealed, but those televisions help space out watching the games, really do.
Mm-hmm.
The reluctance to return to the full service, the pickleball players, the shoot around, is that, I'm sensing that's the part-time help that you don't have now. Is there a considerable cost in that, or is that the fact you just don't have them recruited at this point?
Yeah, we didn't discuss it too much. We were just focusing on our heavier activities. So that's a possibility we can look into.
Is there a cost there? Could we get there maybe by January? My thought is we need to return to normalcy as soon as possible, at least to offer and give the message to the public that we're trying to return to full service.
Sure.
In everything that we do as a city. We've cut back quite a little bit, and I think the message should be that within the guidelines and the mask requirements, the guidance that we have for the COVID-19, we should be moving in that direction.
Yeah, I'll admit, I'm disappointed this doesn't address volleyball, basketball league, and pickleball. I think we
Sure.
dropped the ball here. I'm not sure why we're not.
I can explain. those programs usually start around November, December-ish. With the part-time staff discontinuing of those, we do need officials for those programs. And there wasn't a volunteer group, I guess you would say, that stepped up like baseball and softball or soccer. We didn't have that option. So, but we could start those programs in January, those games, if we were able to prepare for them.
Do you not have a list of officials that you usually use from year in to year out?
Yes, we do.
I think waiting until January is too long for me. I'd like to see it.
Because I'm just thinking, people on those teams would have to really start kind of preparing and planning their schedule now. I mean, is the only issue just payment of the part-time staff and the officials?
The part-time staff, yes.
I'm guessing if you go back and listen to your 3,000 and some voicemails, a lot of them are dealing with, I'm just being, there's only smart alecky, but I'm being serious. I'm guessing a lot of those are probably individuals wanting to know about
There's not too many voicemails we got left. Those were just missed calls. And then I did have on there to call the Salina Parks and Recreation, so I think we've handled some of them, but a lot of them were basketball and volleyball calls.
Well, I'd like to hope that you'll reach out to those that you have this contact information and have a plan for opening up. If maybe it's in January, it could be sooner, but I think you find they're resilient and their desire to want to participate, and they'll come forward if they realize that the benefits there, the assets there to use.
From a budgetary status or perspective, what's the procedure for increasing the funding to allow that?
Well, this entire budget process has been a little unique, but I guess we would need to estimate that cost and come back to you and have you confirm that you want to take on that expense.
Would the entry fee to play in a league come close? It should come close to covering the fees. You already have the building open. You have the heating and the air conditioning on for everybody else. Your fixed costs are there.
There's not much Parks and Rec programming we break even on, but you're right.
I mean, it's got to come close. I mean, your loss has got to be minimal.
We could certainly run those numbers for your consideration.
I think we've seen those, but I think you may have already, I mean, we've seen those before, and I don't recall it being that big of a...
We're within the cost recovery guidelines, and Mike's right. On some of them, we're not recouping all the costs, but we are in those guidelines. And I did do a little research, and December, January, and February of last year, we spent an estimated of $14,000 in official expenses. Now, that's including our youth recreational program. That's including our youth competitive program. That's including our high school program. And that's including our adult basketball program. And all those start in that December, January period. And then they end by the end of February, early March.
I would think with a little work you could get up and running by December, but that's just my opinion. I mean, I have a hard time seeing Kansas Wesleyan in there daily using it and the taxpayer, or the Salina resident not being able to go in there, whether it's adult, youth, and not play.
Yeah, I agree.
And it would be open during the holidays when the kids are out of school.
So
I
think that needs we need to take a hard look at that and try to get something implemented in December.
Yeah.
Anything else I can help you with? Okay, thank you.
Any comments from the public?
Norman Mantle, Salina. As you congregate, condense people into the area, you're going to expose more people to this disease. The news media is reporting that we're having an uptick right now in these places. As cold weather comes, I was under the impression hot weather is more of a problem with this. No, it's not. It's cold weather. It condenses it, makes it more powerful. So if you're going to make an error, you better make an error on the side of caution.
Thank you.
I guess if I could just answer Mr. Shealy's last comment. You were asking or thanking us anything that you could do for us, but I think we should ask you, tell us what you need from us to get your programming where you think you can handle it.
Just the proposed November, December. And if you're directing me to look into basketball and volleyball and those type of things, I would just ask permission to start preparing for that now.
Okay.
Yeah, I look at our
Thank you.
options, and we don't have an option 4 is what I think we need.
But with that, if we run any league, it requires part-time officials. It just does, especially for basketball.
Yeah, and I understand that, but again, I think the cost recovery may not be 100%, but it's got to be pretty close. I mean, I can't believe it's significant enough that we wouldn't be able to put on those programs.
Commissioners, I guess my suggestion would be, you can, if you like, you can proceed with what's been recommended so far and instruct staff to report back on the specifics of cost and cost recovery as relates to the other programming. We can try to turn that as quick as we can.
What else is the Fieldhouse used for besides pickleball also? Is there something else we're missing?
As far as drop-in goes, or
because I think pickleball, isn't that scheduled for certain days? Or
it is, yes. It's more of our drop-in use.
Yeah.
There's a scheduled time. There's
Yeah.
a group of pickleball players that do come in. They were on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, but under this hybrid approach, we would not be open, during that
But
time.
they could do it in the afternoon or something?
That's possible,
And,
yes.
and again, that wouldn't, because they pretty much can set that up themselves and everything, so it really doesn't
They do help,
take any
yes.
staff?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We do have the drop-in basketball, noon ball, but again, that's occurring at noon. We're
Right.
proposing to open up at 2.
Right. Okay, any other comments?
Now, option 1 can be amended, I'm assuming, in that it's not a...
I guess my suggestion would be let us bring you back a little bit more detail if we're going to add programming. rather
Well,
than-
I'm going to do the programming separate with me, but we keep that separate. But as far as recommend, as an example, taking temperatures at the door.
Oh, yes.
So that would be just an amendment to option
Correct.
1, dealing with just specifically the programming.
Correct.
It's here. Okay.
You want to take a shot at it?
I'll take a shot at it. Well, I would move that, I'm so used to having this nice written out, that we direct Parks and Recs to proceed with the plan to reopen the Fieldhouse for futsal and, what was the other activity?
Basketball and volleyball?
Basketball and volleyball.
Are you just looking at option 1 there?
Well,
I mean,
option 1, you're right.
Yeah.
And I would amend that to include taking temperatures at the door. And you may already be doing this, but submitting information to each tournament director that ensures that each coach and family has acknowledged the rules and guidelines. And it's kind of like that. Do you keep extra masks in the Fieldhouse?
We have them available, yes.
Because I would imagine in the heat of battle, some of those masks can get torn, dirty, or become otherwise unusable. Or for the poor kid who legitimately just truly forgot to bring it. But
For those tournaments this summer, we did have extra masks available, sanitizer, those type of things
Okay.
for the public.
all right. I don't know if there were any other things we
Are
discussed.
you,
but-
so we have this right, are you requiring temperatures of all participants that come into the field house, no matter what the?
Anyone walking in the
participant- okay,
door, even
that's-
if it's to use the bathroom.
Okay, I
yeah.
wanted to make sure we were, okay. Got a motion, do we have a second?
I'm sorry, I had one question about the motion. Did you want to include in your motion directing staff to bring back information about the cost of resuming some of that other programming that Mayor Hoppick and
I
you
think
talked about?
we were going to do that as a
Okay,
second.
oh, separate?
direct
Oh,
or
okay, I'm
something.
sorry, I misunderstood
Yeah.
it. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to concur with staff's recommendations to resume the modified operation of the Salina Fieldhouse, subject to the proposed COVID requirements and guidelines, with the requirement of temperatures being taken of all individuals entering the building, and what's the word I want to use here? Submit that that COVID requirements be directed to all participants. Is that kind of, that all participants are given the COVID requirements?
Is there room for a comment yet?
Yes.
I am very conflicted on this because I know that anytime we open up, we put upward pressure on that case curve. On the other hand, I also know that we've got to learn to live with this thing long term, and we can't continue to keep all normal activity squashed. So, I think I'll support it with some reservations, simply because there are some potentially adverse consequences. But there's also adverse consequences of telling people they can't resume normal activity. So I will lean that way.
And if I could just follow up with that, I mean, I'm trusting staff, if we get notification from the health department that we've had an outbreak, we may be revisiting this discussion in another 3 or 4 weeks. So I just, it seems like no decision is final right now when we have
and it
to.
seems like we've got some fairly decent guidelines in place to try to limit that risk. So, let's go.
Okay. We have a motion and a second with the amendments. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. We probably don't really need a motion, do we? Just direction to staff?
Yeah, I think we understand the request. We'd be
Okay.
happy to carry it out.
Okay. If we could get something back to us in the next couple weeks dealing with opening the field house further to the other programming would be great. So, okay. Thank you, Travis. Okay, that moves us to 7.3.
Item 7.3, Downtown Streetscape Project Punch List, Project Update and Consideration of Change Order Number 22, City Project Number 70012.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This has been a long project. Feel like we've completed it mostly, but there's some lagging issues to address. Some of the, I do have just the blue sheet and some pictures here that I'll try to just talk through. Starting with the first page here. Main thing that probably drug this out somewhat, we had a November completion deadline of 2019, so that's almost a year ago now. So in cooperation with the alley and the hotel and the developers around the downtown area, it took longer, and we've kind of finished up the Mulberry corner, just in June of this year. Continued on with some storm sewer work that's now finishing up along Mulberry, as well as Campbell Plaza. That has been an ongoing project. That whole, really half a block, almost 3/4 of that block has been, or at least half the block has been kind of redone, and they're continuing to work on that. And so Campbell Plaza was a delay for quite a while and has yet to be really finished there. So that's going to take us a while even to finish that portion. So the original question was really an update where we're at, punch list items that still remain. And so in talking through that, like I said, the Mulberry Santa Fe is at least done. Second one, overhead structure column grouting and patching areas. The contractor's aware of that. They ordered the grout from the supplier of those columns, and it matched when it came in last year, or 2 years ago when we actually did it. Maybe it was last year, I can't remember actually when they did it, but when they grouted, it looked similar, but it faded very quickly. So as you can see on the columns down there, it's just a poor color match, and they've got another batch of it that they got from the supplier, and they're going to put that up as soon as they can. The crew that does that work is kind of their structural crew, and they're not available or even around here right now until December is what the contractor has said. So that is still waiting for a crew to complete. Some of the other areas that are still remaining, we have some mostly just going through some low areas that are on the project. It's a very flat project. It's very flat downtown, and it's the way it is. So we just have some areas of water that we've been monitoring to a certain extent. Kind of saw them when the project was completed, but they're not real big, but they are there. And some of them are in more pronounced areas, whether they're in a walking area or not, in the curb line. Just some areas that could be an ice concern for us, so we're aware of them. We've actually had our surveyor out looking to try to fix them. So there we go. So this is just a little plan of one of the areas. It's a low spot that we're trying to drain around the Dagny's ice cream store there on the northeast corner, and the curb is just a little bit too high, and we've surveyed it, and we feel like we have a solution for it, but it's taken a while for us to get there. Contractor has tried to fix a couple of the other areas. We feel like maybe we've fixed the steeple, but we're not sure. That's just an area that has some water that comes off their roof, kind of the roof that overhangs their entryway and drips, and then it drains away. And so we've surveyed that as well to try to fix it, and that's been probably a year ago when we fixed that. But either way, these things are kind of, I guess, lagging or just haven't been repaired yet. Really kind of thinking that they would do that when we came back for Campbell Plaza. So the Campbell Plaza portion has not been completed yet due to the adjacent properties still working on their brick walls, and really a lot of restoration there. And after talking to the building official today, it's major renovation to that building, and just no reason to believe it's going to be quick and very soon. So there's no reason we can't really rush on getting that completed.
Yeah, and I may jump in there. What started out as kind of some facade renovation quickly turned into a brick failure, and we had to ask them to secure it. And they're not the only location. Pathway Financial kind of ran into the same thing as they took the stucco off of their, well, backing up a bit, you may recall this history, but those plazas were buildings that were torn down to create those plazas, so those walls are not intended to be exterior brick, and so they were stuccoed over in the 80s, and now as they're removing the stucco, they're finding more damage behind it than might have been anticipated. So with respect to the location north of Campbell Plaza in particular, the front facade failed, and then as they exposed the south facade, or the south wall, they were in for a lot more work than they might have anticipated. So they approached us, and I consented to, the contractor was willing to demobilize out of the plaza to allow them to secure the building. Our concern at the time was not only just working in proximity to each other with the scaffolding they needed to put up, but we didn't want to contribute to any catastrophic failure with our equipment, our excavation. We have planners that contact those walls, and until they get those walls secured, we weren't in a position to remove the planter. So we consented to delaying the work on Campbell Plaza while they tried to shore up the private building to the north.
What's the timeline on the completion of that building, since that seems to be the linchpin that's holding everything?
I don't know that I know a timeline. I know
Don't know. We talked with Sean Pilcher, building official, today, just to see if he knew anything, and it seems like as they get into the project, it gets bigger. So they're still working through the renovation, basically.
And I don't mean to hold up your presentation, but I'd feel good if we had like a date established, because, you know, if they keep running into problems, I just don't want it to be 2 or 3 years down the road and we're still waiting to get our plaza done.
Yes. The other plaza, Strand Plaza, had, like Mike said, had the same issue, and Pathway Financial actually got somebody in there to stucco that right before we did Strand Plaza, which was last year, so that was helpful and timely. The case of, they were stuccoing the outside of the wall. The case of Restore Properties, they're actually re-bricking the outside wall and redoing it, so it's a different process. Wasn't as easy, and bricklayers are hard to find, so but at this point, they really they're still working inside the building and shoring up other things too, so they can't even get to the bricks. So I guess those are some punch list items that remain. The big one, though, is number 5, intersection bollard lighting. So let's just talk about that. That's what the majority of this is probably Blue Sheet kind of focuses on. As we design the project, one of the design features of a downtown, and a lot of downtowns that you see kind of have, it's more pedestrian friendly to have raised crosswalks and raised intersections and narrower places to cross. So the idea was to make it more pedestrian friendly, to slow traffic down. We would put in these kind of just the narrowing of the roads as well as the intersections. And then the way to delineate that is with some bollards, because there's not necessarily a raised curb there. It's a little bit of a curb, but it's not much of a curb. So it's just more for drainage. It's a little valley for drainage more than anything. So it doesn't redirect cars, and it's not as easy to see. So the bollards were installed to help delineate pedestrian areas and street areas. They were designed kind of to match, or they were really picked kind of match the downtown aesthetic feature. They look kind of like the top of them kind of looks a little bit like the United building. It's just kind of that was a neat artistic feature. So they're not, they weren't designed to really, they're not a concrete bollard. There's places where you'll see a concrete bollard or a steel bollard in the ground, and it'll bend your car up, or it won't budge. So that was more of a different type of bollard approach. These are more just decorative. It's slow speeds. There's not a lot of danger with cars and pedestrians. Everybody's going slow. There's a lot of pedestrians down there. However, during construction, we just had trouble with them. Looking back, we probably should have left them out and not put them up until we were done with construction, because during construction, with the narrowing of the roads, traffic control, the work that was going on, they seem to have gotten hit more. So we had trouble with them there. So one of the parts of punch list items is to move those back, and that has been we're going to move those back a couple of feet, and just to see kind of just a good example of, if you go out there today, or even not too long ago when I was out there, I took a picture of, I think it's at the very end. Did I put it in there? I don't know. Yeah, there it is. So you can kind of see the right there is about 18 inches back. That's where those cones are, 18 inches back from the curb. So somebody who's got a trailer or just doesn't drive very well just drove right through there. You can see the line, and it's like, yeah, that's been a problem. And this was designed by HDR. These intersections are plenty wide enough for people to make turns. The curb radii are good. But for whatever reason, we just have trouble with people making these corners and just not doing a great job of that. So in light of that, we felt like we're going to move them back 2 more feet. And 2 more feet was definitely something that HDR looked at, and we feel like that's what we came up with. And so actually we've installed some of them further back. This is just the intersection at Iron that these haven't been moved yet, but some of them kind of middle through the project, we actually just constructed them back farther. So we feel like that's going to work better for us. So part of some of the things that need to be done still as well is to move the bollards back. So in light of that, we thought we might move them back and light them at the same time. But the problem has been with the lighting. So let's talk about that. Intersection bollard lighting retrofit. The project had lighted bollards and they were specified to be IP65s, which IP65, what does that mean? If you go buy lighting, kind of outdoor lighting today, they'll have an IP rating, which is ingress protection. And just going through that, there's different levels of that, but the bottom line is they're protected from water intrusion. They're meant to be outdoors, and they're meant to be on 120 volt AC power. So that was the type of bollard that the designer chose, that we all agreed looked pretty good, should work. And then as we approved the shop drawings and got the bollards delivered to us, then installed, concerns were raised by the contractor and the city building inspectors that help look at the project as well when they're doing their inspections, and thought that this doesn't seem right. So the bollards didn't seem to be manufactured, from what we could tell, to meet the IP65 designation. So after looking at that further, it was seemed to be clear that the supplier just they weren't able to meet it. There was just no way to meet this type of designation. And basically we went back and forth with the contractor, which then, the designer is Canterbury Designs, or they were the supplier. They're made aware of concerns. They didn't really believe it was their responsibility, didn't think it was an issue. They've got these things installed quite a few places in town, or not in town, but in the U.S. This is the picture of their website. I'm sorry that's turned, but that's on their website. Those are bollards just sitting outside by some trees, and I think in maybe climates that may have given us a false sense of security from the supplier that, oh yeah, the suppliers knows what they're doing. But in hindsight, they're more of an aesthetic feature, and they don't do a lot with lighting. And so we've not been able to really, the contractor or the city or us is really not, or the HDR has not been able to make much headway with them. But after about 9 months here, they did give us a retrofit. So they said, okay, we'll supply some lighting and a system that would fit with a low voltage system. So what is a low voltage system? Instead of going with 120 volt power, go with 12 volt low voltage system, which is kind of what landscape lighting you have in your yard, or a lot of our lighting downtown is low voltage lighting, and it's just better for with LED lighting. You can get pretty good light out of it still, and it's adequate and safe. So the idea was to retrofit these bollards to get to basically an IP67 UL listing low voltage solution. Canterbury came back with a retrofit that we thought was a possibility, but after HDR looked at it, it would not work, and it didn't meet what we had kind of redesigned for the contractor to meet. So it seems like after so many months and quite a while of looking at that and going back and forth with Canterbury, that's where we are now. The contractor now is just looking at not working with that supplier anymore, and just retrofitting the similar lighting that we have out there already today. We have some lighting that's all over the downtown, and we would basically just put that same light in the bollards, and it would work off the system that's down there, the lighting that's in the area. Called a Q-Tran light, basically. It's a kind of a strip lighting, and if you look underneath any of it's kind of the accent lighting that's down there today. So it would work really well. It would meet all the requirements for UL listings. And UL listing is just an agency that makes sure lighting is safe and can be installed in the way that they say it is going to work. It would be compatible, and so at this point, we don't know if we'll ever get anything from Canterbury. They're the supplier that made these lights, or that supplied these lights, but we are now going with a system that is Q-Tran, IP67 rated, very safe, goes with the drivers that are out there, and the contractor has given us a price on that a while back, and they're trying to update that price basically. So we don't have a for sure price from them, but $37,872.25 is what they had previously. And at this point, they don't believe it's going to be that much, but that's the high number in case we have to split that 3 ways. And so the idea was, we just felt like HDR had some role in this, the contractor definitely had some role in this, and we have some say in this as well. And if we split it 3 ways, it's not as tough to deal with. We've already invested $164,000 in the bollards. There's 53 of them. We do have some spares, and so just feel like we're to the point where if we each put in $12,000 between the 3 of us, we could get this finalized and done. So as far as the project fiscal note goes, let's go to that page. The fiscal note talks about our contingency that we've had so far. We've had some construction engineering change orders so far, and we have some remaining funds still. And we've actually had some additions and subtractions to our change orders. Some of the change orders were for a savings, actually, so that's why you'll see it's weird to think that it could have worked out, but we had some things that went better than we'd hoped, and had the contractor had some better ideas to make things cost a little less. So that was really nice, especially on the structures. The overhead structures was the main help on that. And then if we do it a third split, it's the 12662408. And we still have some money remaining in case anything else comes up, but we feel like we're getting to the end. It's just we still have a few things that are out there. When you look at bollards, from my own perspective, I thought, well, why did we put those darn things so close? You know, why wouldn't you just put them back farther? And it's a design and the truck turning movements. And well, this is in Wichita. I noticed this in Wichita when I was down there last. I think it was about a year ago. Those are 18 inches from the back of curb, and they're in Wichita, and they're on a street that's right in downtown Bricktown. And it's somewhat common to kind of delineate people from driving on sidewalks and just staying in the road. So it's not uncommon. I don't feel like it was a bad design, but it's definitely, for us, we feel like moving them back a couple feet will help, and they'll still serve the purpose that they were meant to. Let's see, anything else? I guess that's all I've got for the bollards. So HDR is here today. They've helped us design this solution to try to retrofit these things. Smoky Hill I don't believe is here today, but I've talked to them quite a bit about it. They had other commitments, but they're on board to try to get this done. They don't like it lasting as long as it has either. And so we're to the point now where that's your update. That's quite the update. We're hoping it'd be shorter than this, but it's still a few things lingering out there. I'll stand for questions.
Okay, questions, comments from the commission?
I don't know, are there any to my left? Okay, I've got, all right, sorry about this. I know everyone's wanting to get home to the Chiefs game. Okay, just in regard to the lighting bollards, to me, I mean, and granted, I'm not an engineer, this to me seems like a product problem. Obviously, we had specifications that
Correct.
We were specifying a product that was IP65 compatible, and they supplied a product that is not IP65 compatible.
Correct.
So I don't see why the city is assuming any burden of the cost for this. I mean, and I don't know if that's an HDR problem, if it's a Smoky Hill problem, if it's a city staff problem, but whoever signed off on accepting the Canterbury designs, if their spec sheet said that it specifically that it was not IP65 compatible, then I mean, to me, if that's on us, then we bear that burden. If that's on HDR or any of the other subcontractors, or if that's Canterbury Designs misrepresenting their specifications, then it's on them. But I'm just not. I'm not envisioning a scenario where, I guess I would just like to know. Where did it break down? Was it Canterbury? Was it somebody who didn't realize we were looking for an IP65 product? I just want to know where the process broke down.
Commissioner, I was involved in a couple of these conversations, and I tried to get kind of to the bottom of the same question you're raising, but until this evening, I was not under the impression that it was as clearly specified IP65, asserted IP65, and they failed to deliver IP65. Our conversations were about UL listings, and I think I'm going to need to turn to HDR or someone to help me understand the answer to your question, because that is not how I understood this scenario to this point.
Right, because if it wasn't called out in the specs, then whoever developed the specs, and if that was an expectation that we put forth, that this was going to be UL listed for a damp location or a wet location or whatever the thing is, that's a problem.
And I guess I'm making some assumptions, but we made an aesthetic choice as we went through catalogs to make the selection. So rather than specify an IP65 or UL compliant light fixture and have the contractor then go find one and propose it to us, we specified a Canterbury light fixture. So that's why I felt like we collectively had a role in, we picked this out of a catalog cut sheet and specified it at the outset. But I'm going to have to defer to others to help me understand the answer to the question you just raised.
Yeah, because if you pick something out of a catalog, but it doesn't meet the IP65, then we should have been notified of that.
Right, that's the problem, is they don't, their website, if you look at their website today.
I don't care about their website. They saw the specs, so they should.
And then they put that on their submittal and sent it to us, and then it was approved on that regard, and then what actually comes in the mail and we get didn't work. So I can have HDR explain that.
Putting a finer point on it, the question I raised is, can we send them back? And the answer was no. Beyond that, I guess I need more information.
Yeah, we've bought them and they won't send us our money back, so we're stuck with them at this point. But HDR is here, and we can talk about IP ratings and UL listings. My understanding was HDR approves the shop drawings, and the shop drawing did say IP65 on it. So it would seem like, okay, that's what they should deliver, and what we've learned is the supplier just put that on there that's because what we called for, they stuck it on there. So we don't have any way to really know if they meant to have that on there, or if they know what that even means. But at this point, they were not able to deliver that, and then they said, well, that's not what we should have put on that drawing, and then really we shouldn't have supplied them for this. So that it got to be pretty messy with that at this point, because we've got them now, and they're just thought we'd try to retrofit them to get them to work. I don't know if that's is that a fair?
Come on up. Yeah, please come on up. Yeah.
Good evening. So
could you give us your name, please? I'm sorry.
Yes, my name is Simon Sun. I'm with HDR.
Hi, Simon.
I have assumed the project manager role for this project during the construction phase when my predecessor left the company. So I came on board and worked with public works staff as well as the city manager's office to follow up and close out this deal. So with regards to the question was the UL listing. So if I may, I'm going to add a little bit of clarity to that. So the technical specifications that went along with the bid package has a specific section in there, and I apologize for not knowing the exact section number off the top of my head, but it's the outdoor electrical section. So in there it says the product needs to meet code. Okay, so my understanding from talking with my designer, who's the electrical expert on this, is that UL listing is something that is expected for any kind of electrical fixture. If you were to go to Home Depot and purchase a light and you look at it, it's UL listed. So, that's our technical intent, is that the product that's supplied must be UL meets code, which means UL listed. So that's the reason for that. With regards to the IP65, is a designation that was supplied by the manufacturer, I guess. I should say, manufacturer, Canterbury in this case. It's clearly stated on the cut sheet that it's IP65 rated. So as reviewing the shop drawing submittal, we saw the IP65 designation, check, it's good. Knowing that our technical specification should cover the project with regards to having something that would be meeting code. So my understanding is that as we received the product and the contractor started installing this, and they noticed that I don't see some of the UL listing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the UL listing label was not on there. So perhaps that raised a red flag. And then somebody looking at, after closely inspecting some of the interior structure of the bollard that's supplied, that's when some additional concerns were raised.
So I guess this is Deputy City Manager Jacob Wood. My understanding was that the bollards were IP65, but they were not UL listed. Is that correct?
The cut sheet says it's supposed to be IP65, correct.
But there's a difference between the IP65 and the UL listing. So it was IP65 with regard to the bollard and how water gets into the bollard, but the lighting inside was not UL listed.
Correct. My understanding is that when the contractor opened it up and looked at it, they was unable to locate a UL listed stamp.
Right. So it did meet the IP65 as far as the cut sheet said, but the UL listing was different.
And Canterbury's response was, we never said it was UL listed.
Right. So there is a little bit, Canterbury did kind of meet some of the design standards. They didn't meet the UL listing. Am I off there?
If I may offer up my perspective on that, the IP65, there's designation, I think the information may be in the packet, Dan, in terms of details. So it's supposed to be able to withstand continuous water jets, I believe.
Or sitting water or something, wasn't it?
Water intrusion
Water
or
jets, so
something,
a
yeah.
continuous
I can't remember
spray
what it was.
of some sort, and not have water intrusion. Well, I think when I don't know if there was a rain event or whatever the situation was, so I apologize for not knowing the specifics, but it was clearly not the case because water was inside the bollard as well as some of the electrical connections. So to me, the IP65 designation, even though it's specified, in my opinion, it did not meet that, and that's the opinion of my electrical specialist as well.
You want to come
Yeah,
to the...
could you come to the
Please, I'm sorry,
microphone,
come up
please?
here so the...
Provide your name, please.
Yeah, Corey M. Huff, Vice President with HDR. I was just reminding Simon too, the base plate also has to get connected into the power, and the conduit needs to come up through there, and so there's a hole in the bottom of that. That piece of the work wasn't really coordinated very well either, so there's actually a hole in the base plate that you could really argue is not IP65 to begin with the way it was set up. And then the gaskets around the shell where the two pieces come together are really poor quality. So just some of the other things here, when you look at it, didn't really make sense on how the product was put together and assembled, and the quality of construction was of concern. And then you had a mixture of waterproof fittings in the bottom of the base of this thing, and then you had exposure to 120 volt connection just right above that to where it entered a fixture. So it just wasn't the interior of it was not designed properly either, in our opinion. So that's where a lot of the concern
What
came
has
from.
Canterbury's comments been to all of this? Because I'm guessing that all of this has been brought to their attention.
Yeah, I think, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't had much interaction with Canterbury. They're more with the general.
Dan, you want to?
Dan, I don't know.
Yeah, and as we met and talked about this, we tasked the contractor, since they were actually the customer that purchased it, with interfacing with Canterbury, but
Right.
I'll let you answer that, and then I have a follow-up question.
If I might interject, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. The IP65 rating applies to the exterior of the bollard and the seals and so on, and is supposed to ensure that water stays out of the bollard up to a certain level, direct jets. The UL rating relates to the electrical interior. Apparently, we did not have the UL rating as a part of the spec sheet.
I don't recall if it's on the shop drawing.
It was not on the shop drawing.
Yeah, not on the shop
Okay,
drawing.
so the lights were not UL rated, and that became apparent when they were installing them. It raised some questions, and then it brought the whole rest of the issue up. My question is, why would the light not be UL rated when you go to a hardware store? You cannot buy something that's not UL rated.
And
Why would
follow-
they even manufacture such a thing?
And follow-up question, when you see that, why don't you stop installing them?
They did. Yeah, that was
I mean, is that-
that was the first ones they put in, and noticed that, yeah, we didn't, well,
They didn't energize them.
yeah, they're not actually hooked, they're installed only because, just for the delineation. It's just what they haven't been energized or actually lit for quite a while, actually since June of 19? So June of 2019 was when we noticed it, so, it was a problem.
So the
So the
original
Canterbury question,
Yeah.
I don't, it's really the contractor in Canterbury.
Has the
Canterbury just
contractor,
denied
has the
it.
contractor contacted
Oh, yeah.
Canterbury?
Yeah, and the contractor actually did get Canterbury to send in this revised design, retrofit, basically. So we sent the contractor, HDR designed the retrofit, said this is what we think would work and work the best. And we have UL listing, and this is compatible with the system that's down there. So we sent that to the contractor, he sent it to Canterbury. Canterbury said, we don't like that idea. We're gonna go with a different idea. Should still work. So it's, okay, well, if they come up with an alternative plan that can work and has lighting that works and UL listing, so okay, we could entertain that idea and review it. And so we did that with HDR, and they came back with lights that just, they were not gonna, there's no way they could be UL rated, because that's not what their company does. They don't really have UL, from what I can tell, UL rating capacity. They haven't said that, and they haven't said they will do it. They just haven't addressed that as an issue. They're just a manufacturer of aesthetic features that go outdoors, but they don't light very many of them. And so we're concerned with anything they give us at this point, because you'd have to hire some outside firm to come try to UL rate it or determine if it's meets those requirements. And it's just, we don't feel like they're going to get there, and the contractor just doesn't get very good response from them when he talks to them. So we haven't been able to. They say that these things work wherever they put them in, and they're not worried about meeting any more of our requirements at this point.
Because they're not the ones that get sued if something
Right.
happens.
I mean, it'd be different, but I mean, I'm sure that the five of us collectively up here are all hearing the echoes of Jaden Hicks in our minds. And
Yeah, some 25 years after the installation.
Yeah. Even if
That's
it's,
why we like this low voltage solution.
even if it's UL
it's good.
rated, but it doesn't meet the IP65, which now I understand are two different issues, it seems to me like we still have an issue that it's not watertight like it should be.
So that's why we're referring to low voltage.
Mhm.
We kind
Come, if you could, I'm sorry,
Hold on, Corey.
you're being televised so that everybody can hear.
Corey M. Huff again. That's why we're proposing the low voltage, because it uncouples the IP65. It doesn't really matter that it's waterproof at that point in time. It can be used in an exterior situation, and the transformer is protected in the node cabinet behind it. Is the way I understand it.
So
We think it's a safe and good design.
basically, this protects us from having some type of electrical incident, as I'll call it, for lack of a better term. Has the electrician, I believe Precision Electrics, who was the sub on this, have they approved this also? Are they comfortable with this?
Yeah, they were Precision Electrical was the one who thought this would be a good idea.
Okay.
And then HDR looked into it further and said, yep, that's a really good idea, and let's design and go that direction. So they tweaked it maybe a little bit, but the concept's the same. We're using these lights all over downtown, all over there anyway. So these lights are what's lighting the sculpture bases and the
low voltage.
The low voltage, it's just everywhere down there, and it's safe. And if one of them broke and there was a hot wire there, it's 12 volts. It's like what's in your yard for
The next
landscaping.
question is, and again, I don't like having to pay any of it, and if there's a minimal amount, I guess we need to move on at some point, because it doesn't sound like Canterbury's is able to be worked with.
We don't believe they're going to be cooperative But
You talk about splitting this in a third, with the Canterbury being a third.
nope, the contractor. We don't have a contract with Canterbury, so I just want to make
Okay.
that clear. It's a contractor, HDR, and the city. The contractor,
Okay.
if they can squeeze blood from a turnip from
But they're
Canterbury,
not-
that's
okay, so
great.
Canterbury's not involved in, originally.
Canterbury
what
is
we-
not, has
okay.
no
Yeah,
contract with the city. We can put as much pressure on them as we can, but at the end of the day, we have no contract. They have no obligation to us.
You know, I read it the same way, and I was a little bit
Yes.
confused.
So it's the-
but-
And as
Okay.
additional clarification, that total amount is the price that the contractor provided. So that's parts and labor.
That's moving them back
It's every-
2 feet, that's putting the light in.
Well, there's a change order that I signed off on for moving them back.
The moving them is separate.
Okay.
It's
It's a separate
attached
cost.
to this, but the relighting them is the 37,872.25.
So the 30, that number is what the contractor provided as a cost to retrofit them. That included parts and labor.
Okay.
So if we put in a third of that, HDR puts in a third of that, the contractor is going to receive that 2/3 payment, and they're going to have to complete the job
Okay.
for 2/3 payment.
Correct. They'll either try to get money
That's
from
right.
Canterbury or get some supplies from Canterbury, but they have to install the system that meets our requirements for our 2/3 amount, and then they either do a really good job at it or be really efficient, or they lose money. It's hard to say, but it's a solution that gets us all down the road and doesn't go to a longer legal battle, I guess, is the next step otherwise.
I guess I'm just having a little bit of a problem with it, because basically it sounds like Canterbury designed a defective product. They misrepresented their product as to its capabilities and what it was appropriate to be used. And yet Canterbury is the only one that's walking away from this whole. And I mean, my feeling is, if, you know, we specified, we paid for something specific. I don't care who it comes down to, if it's the actual contractor or whatever, but my inclination is there needs to be some concerted effort to go after Canterbury, even if it's a round of legal before. I think that I think this is, I don't know, I guess I think this is premature, because I just think that responsibility devolves to either the entity that misrepresented it or the contracting entity that made that purchase and is out that money to go back and recover their damages from Canterbury. But I just don't see how HDR and the city and the contractor splitting that is, I don't know, it doesn't seem like an acceptable solution to me. I guess that's not a question. I did have some follow-up questions about damaged bollards. And I just wondered, can we get some more information about how and when they were struck? I think you'd broken it down a little bit in terms of the bollards that were damaged during construction. And I guess my question is, were those damaged by vehicles that were working on the streetscape? Were they damaged by commercial vehicles, like making deliveries and, you know, whatnot, and trying to navigate, you know, our reduced capacity on our streets? Were they damaged by private vehicles?
All the above.
All
We
the
don't have
above?
we don't have any record of all of them except for two. We have two that we were able to catch the license plate and get insurance out of. The rest of them,
Just unknown.
no, I don't know.
Those that we do know, they weren't exclusively construction equipment.
Yeah,
It
that
was,
wasn't construction equipment, right. It's
private
just
vehicles
errant
while
vehicle
construction was
or
going on.
trailer.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay, and so we did did we go ahead and file police
We-
reports,
again,
even on the ones that we didn't catch?
Contractor is responsible for them. They're responsible for trying to recoup their costs on those, and so they've gotten insurance settlements on a couple of them, but we are not able to go after, I don't think we don't have a police report on the other 9. 11 of them have been hit, so that has been the problem. Now, not that many have been hit since construction ended, but there's been 11 total.
When do our warranties in general for this project expire? Have they expired already?
No, November of 19 was when it substantially
date.
complete. 2 years after that, November of 21.
Okay, so
Got another
whether
year.
it's on workmanship or materials, we have until November of 2021 to notify
Correct.
of issues. Okay.
Yeah, it's helpful. I mean, I think 1 year warranty is what we had for years right when I first got here, and I don't know when we got it to 2, but two definitely does help us.
Oh, I was going to say, I think, yeah, two's
And
great.
like I said, we haven't even finished some things, so one of my pictures was, I like this picture just because it's the landscape guy. He was finishing up 2 weeks ago. So there's our final blue zingers that we finally got able. It's sometimes when you specify plants and life happens around the U.S., some of those plants aren't available for a while. So these were the final plant they were able to get planted a few weeks ago. So that's something that just recently was completed based on kind of the landscaping and world of buying plants and getting the right kind of plants planted. So we don't even have a final completion on that yet. So when they say 2 year warranty, it's going to be depending on which part of the project. Of course, Campbell Plaza, some of these other things aren't even done yet. So
2 years from completion.
2 years
Okay.
from when it's complete.
Okay, because that was kind of my follow-up question, and I don't know if it's for Mr. Stack or for Mr. Scragg, because the action that we're considering today for approving the change order number 22, I wanted to know if this implied or indicated that we are signing off on accepting everything else. That's
No, this is just a change order. Yeah, this is
Okay.
just trying to get the bollards lighting moved down the road a little bit. It's been hold up for a while.
And then in regard to the change orders, I know that we had an exceptionally low contingency on this project. That's been emphasized a lot in the past. But I also know that we did do some significant value engineering. Specifically, I'm thinking of the overhead structures.
Overhead structures, yep.
And we drastically changed, the original vision to what we got. So I guess my question is, and maybe it's just something that we could get some sort of a statement about the contingency fund and the change orders that were made, but so what gets that windfall from, what account gets that windfall from the value engineering that we did? Does that go into the contingency fund?
Well, it would depend on the timing. I would have to look. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. No, it doesn't look like Debbie's
Yeah.
here. It would depend, with respect to the overhead structures, I have a timing question of when that was realized relative to this contract. But otherwise, it would go into the project fund, and it would
Right.
then did not be spent at the end of the project.
Okay.
Yeah, once
we
we
need to check on
finalize the
overhead
project
structures.
and you have a final accounting, then all that goes back, or you have either a surplus or a deficit. But in this case, I think we're going to have a surplus.
Okay, because I was just thinking in terms of the way that the material is presented here, just between the change orders that include both the additions and the subtractions, if we had a $500, if we realized a $500,000 savings, and then we had a $505,000 whoopsie daisy, that would only show us at a negative 5.
Right. Yep.
So I guess my question is, if we could get just maybe a summary of the change orders and maybe some sense from, what I want to do is confirm that it hasn't been absorbed and spent through contingency changes. Just some reassurance that that's something that in the final accounting is going to.
I don't
And that's
know.
and I know that's a question for the Director of Finance. But, and I guess something I just keep coming back to is, and Simon, I apologize, I didn't catch your last name, so I don't mean to not call you by your last name, but, who was and I've asked this several times, and I don't really feel like I've ever gotten an answer. Who was the overall project manager? At the end of the day, who gets to stand up there and cut the ribbon, take the credit, or take the blame in the case of something like this? Is it HDR? Is it Public Works? I mean, who was the boss on this? Where did the buck stop?
Day-to-day project management locally would have been the Public Works Department. As it relates to Canterbury, we quickly were relying on many others to try to get to the bottom of it. So, I mean, there's an entire process in terms of specking, receiving cut sheets, reviewing cut sheets, approving them, that involves more than just city staff, if that's your question.
I guess my question is from a city staff perspective. I mean, and it kind of relates to when, was it last week or a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the sidewalk dining? And it's like, so, you know, who is the point person for ensuring that our sidewalk dining applications are consistent with our own zoning ordinances? And so I guess I'm just curious as to, I mean, is it Public Works? I mean, would it have been, would Jim Kowach have been considered the project manager on the city of Salina's behalf? Or did we, like when we were talking about with the wastewater treatment plant, did we transfer that responsibility to HDR?
We did not bring in a project manager, didn't bring HDR in as a project manager. We brought them in as a designer, but they still would have a role. With respect to a single point of contact on a project this complex, there's many people there. We have individual inspectors that are out inspecting portions of it. We have someone from the Parks Department looking at landscaping. We have an electrical inspector looking at electrical. Yeah, ultimately, the Public Works Director was the project manager for the project in terms of budgeting.
I mean, that's my question.
And,
so, you know, when it's Parks and Rec, you know, obviously with our chain of command, you've got the Parks and Rec person that's on the street that reports back to Parks and Rec admin. And then, you know, where does it keep going to? Where is the
right? That inspection report doesn't necessarily make it to the Public Works Director or me as the city manager.
I mean, yeah.
Unless someone flags it as a failed inspection that they're not able to resolve at their level of the organization, that there's no way the Public Works Director or myself would be able to, there aren't enough hours in the day.
Oh, absolutely, I understand that, but in the event of a failed expectation or a failed product or whatever it is that we're dealing with, I mean, that's been my question all along.
With respect to this lighting question, it was red flagged. It was between myself, Dan, Jim Kowach, and others. We met as much as a year ago trying to put a plan together, and I completely understand your question. In fact, I was planning to double back, and I'm going to apologize in advance and put HDR on the spot, but I pursued the same line of questioning about whether it was a failure on the part of Canterbury and whether we had a cause of action against Canterbury, and I could have swore the answer I got was no, that it was unclear, there was too much uncertainty, and it wasn't nearly as clear-cut that Canterbury was at fault as it was represented this evening. If I was left with the impression that I just got tonight, we would be pursuing Canterbury. So I'm trying to understand what was initially represented and what was represented this evening.
That meeting that we thought we were going to go after Canterbury the best we could, but we didn't think that, since we don't have a contract with Canterbury, the contractor would have to do that. And at the end of the day, we have a contract with the contractor, so that's the direction, I guess, that we felt like we can't really go after Canterbury. We didn't think we'd go after Canterbury, so maybe we can. How do we do that as a city if we don't have a contract with them?
So from just purely a spec standpoint, I was left with the impression that because we chose Canterbury for aesthetic reasons, and the way that we spec'd it, and the way we instructed the contractor, and the cut sheets that we received back, created too much uncertainty for there to be a cause of action against Canterbury. This evening, we're talking about they don't meet IP65, they let in water, they have holes in the base. We talked about all that before.
Yeah.
But when I asked the question, can we go after Canterbury, do we have a case the answer was no.
I don't remember
And
that
not,
being.
not
I don't
from
remember-
you, it's from HDR.
I mean, I asked HDR, I don't remember that being the answer, but like maybe was Simon at the meeting the last meeting? I think Corey and Simon were there, but I don't remember it being no, but we can see.
You can chime in too. Again, Corey, yeah, my recollection was that we were going to try to go after Canterbury and get them to participate. The equal thirds were going to be HDR, Canterbury, and the general contractor.
So I'll be more clear.
At the end of
The question I asked was, why don't we offer to pay them a restocking fee and ship all these back?
I think that's, if that's the direction that you want to choose to go, I think that's perfectly available as an option. I think the feedback we're getting back from Canterbury is that, Dan has alluded to it, they're not real cooperative as far as working with the general contractor, so.
And I do recall, we talked
yeah.
about going to litigation, the likelihood of success, and how long we'd had the material in hand.
Yeah.
But I came away with the impression that we didn't think we had a strong enough position.
Well, the specking the item by name creates some problems in that regard, I think. That we talked about that.
Right.
Their cut sheet does say IP65, and the contract specifications do require it to be UL listed. They're not able to do the UL listing, and they won't pay for it to be UL to review it. So
correct me if I'm wrong, the cut sheet got approved.
It does, for general conformance with the contract specifications, yeah, with the contract requirements.
So there was a checkpoint that could have been rejected, but it wasn't.
Right, because they didn't submit the UL certification with it, so, that's why, if the general contractor, confirms that the UL listing is there on their product, they procure it, right? They're part of the procurement process as well. We're a part of specing it and reviewing it. Like we've talked many times, it's a partnership between a lot of people to deliver projects like this. And that UL listing, the ability to be UL listed was not there. And they weren't willing to go to the expense to do the review to get it UL listed either. So I think we've bumped into that several times on this pursuit of Canterbury. And, we're trying to, that's why we're willing to help pay for part of it. To try to make it right by the city and try to get something that's safe and it's in good condition.
We had a conversation that we spec'd it by name. The contractor bought what we told him to, and then after the fact, after the cut sheets are in and we're actually installing them, we start to realize we have a problem. So the conversation I was in, we all collectively took a lot more ownership than throwing them under the bus like we did tonight.
Yeah, that's not the intention for us to throw them under the bus. I mean, we feel like we have a role to play as well, and that's why we're willing to help do this, pay part of the fee to get this right. We're not trying to say we're completely blameless in that, our shop drawing reviewer, if he'd thought to say, hey, we need to have the UL listing provided to us, before we say, yeah, it generally conforms. That could have saved a lot of headache right there. We also, expect the general contractor to do his due diligence and making sure those documents are in place and everything else, and that he's reviewed it for general conformance as well. So when we receive a shop drawing, the contractor's representing to us that he has done that. So there's some shared responsibility in that flow of information to us.
Which creates the opportunity for Canterbury to push back.
Yeah.
They submitted, we approved them. In answer to your question, that's more in keeping with my recollection of the conversation we went through and how we ended up at a conclusion that
we didn't get
not
what we wanted, but there was enough steps in there. They're saying you approved it, you accepted it.
There was enough, for lack of a better word, blame to go around that it did not seem clear cut to me that we could just go after Canterbury and go buy a replacement product.
So did we ask for the product by name?
Yes, we did.
And the product we asked for didn't meet the specs we provided, so there's confusion at the very start of the process when we say we expect the product to meet these specifications, but then we say this is the product we want, and it doesn't meet those specifications. We sent a mixed message, when we did it that way.
And I think that's why,
that's why
we're not holding Smoky Hill all the way accountable for the whole thing. Because if it if it hadn't met the spec and it had been right and we hadn't asked for the specific thing, then we could hold the contractor accountable.
But they didn't meet their own internal specs of being IP65. Ultimately, I mean, if you look in a catalog and it says IP65 and you're like, okay, cool, I want IP65, and you buy it, and what you get actually isn't IP65, whether it's because of design or poor construction or, they just put it on there so they could sell more units. We didn't get what we didn't get what we specified. I mean,
So who rates it as IP65? Is that like UL, an independent lab somewhere, or is it just something that a vendor can put on their product?
right, like I make a light fixture and can put IP65 on it.
Well, I can say that our shop drawing reviewer, and Simon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the guy that reviewed our shop drawing, he did his due diligence, reviewed everything, looked at the cut sheets, saw that the material that was spec'd was, shown in the catalog for outdoor use. Dan showed it earlier, that they're being used outdoors in other locations. It had the IP65 on it. I know he wishes that he would have, raised let's make sure this is UL listed instead of taking it for granted, because I think we all take it for granted that these electrical installations and equipment are properly certified by UL listing. And the pushback we got back, on getting it listed and the cost to do it was a little bit surprising that you wouldn't want to go do that. It's just as a matter of liability, as a manufacturer. But that's the case that we're in right now. We've sat down, we immediately, we want to make this right. It's a partnership. You asked who gets to go and raise their hand and take all the credit for, the project being great. Well, nobody really gets to do that on projects. It's the people of Salina that paid for it that gets to do that. We're here to help try to deliver on a vision. There was a lot of collaboration early on how this is going to look and what it's going to look like, all the way down to selecting fixtures like this, because this is what the city and the people wanted in the public outreach. Anytime you spec a specific product, you create a problem, a bit of a bidding problem, and you create a bit of a liability issue as far as who owns it. And that's really, the root of the cause. That's where the problem initiated, is just speccing a specific item instead of saying, we'll take 3 of these different, items, and letting the contractor then pick the one that he wants to provide, having to do all of those certifications that they would typically do as a general, make sure it's UL listed and everything else. I think.
And we spec'd it because of the Art Deco theme we were trying to accomplish. So we specifically went out and found this product.
Who made the decision that it's like, okay, we want Canterbury design number 101?
My recollection is it was a collaborative process through the public involvement and the stakeholder meetings selecting different fixtures and stuff.
And I totally get that. And if you show me 3 light fixtures and I'm like, I love light fixture A, and you're telling me light fixture A is going to work, then I think problem solved. But if you're showing me like 3 different light fixtures and, number 1 and number 2 aren't applicable in our situation because of the light that they put out or where the light goes or whether they're, UL listed for a damp location or whatever the thing is. I mean, I feel like now kind of like the people of Salina are getting the blame put on them because it's like, oh, you stakeholders, you picked the Art Deco one, you picked the fancy Art Deco one, that's on you.
Please don't misunderstand me. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. I think that the credit for the project and how it will look in the end is what they get to use, for the years to come. And we're here to make sure that you guys get what you want in the end. Make sure it's safe. We've tried to push back and make sure that you guys get the right thing here, and we're willing to help make that happen and make sure that you guys are satisfied with it, both in the final product and then how it gets paid for as well. So we'll defer, Mike, to you and Dan on.
Well, that's ultimately what we tried to accomplish. I wasn't trying to paint the stakeholders as being responsible either. The point was, rather than just, the reason we deviated from the more typical, we need lighted bollards, bid 'em, and it's fully on the contractor, is we were trying to do an Art Deco theme throughout the downtown. So we went out and, the designer went out and found choices. With respect to the cost sharing, that is ultimately where our conversation ended up, was, all right, hey, can we find a way to split this remaining responsibility? But it did start from, we did start down the path of, do we have a position to pursue with Canterbury? Would it be productive? But it was more, in my recollection is it was more as he just described in terms of just conversation, a lot of roles to play, and this is where we ended up. I think another factor was how long we had the product, or the contractor had the product from the time that they ordered it, took delivery, to identification of the problem and getting back to the vendor.
Canterbury offered to make a change even though it didn't meet the UL standards, correct?
Yes, they offered a change that we collectively, with HDR's help, rejected because we still didn't think it was sufficient.
And again, I think we need to kind of move this on, but at the least, I would think we should go back to Canterbury and say, okay, we're not going to require you to do this. And this was an expense that you would have entailed, and at least try to get some kind of reimbursement out of them. Does that, I mean, I don't know if that can be done, but we're saying we're not going to require you to come in and redo this, and there would have been a cost associated with that to them, I'm guessing. Am I correct?
Yes, and one of the conclusions we reached was, we, as Dan mentioned, we don't have a direct relationship with Canterbury.
Right.
We have a relationship with the contractor who, at the direction of the plans, made the purchase from Canterbury.
I guess we would ask the contractor to go back at a minimum and try to do that.
Well, in part, that's what contributed to this length of time from when we identified it and talked about it till now, is the contractor
Because
been trying to go around with
Canterbury offered up a solution, but the solution was not acceptable. So to me, the contractor ought to go back and say, we're not going to require you to do that. We're going to take care of it ourselves, but in lieu of that, X number of dollars needs to be reimbursed.
And I think they could do that, and they could, if they're successful in this scenario, they could apply it to their third.
That's what they did.
Of this.
They did that.
And
So
what was Canterbury's response?
Canterbury has not responded to that yet, believe it or not.
So either way, that wouldn't be money coming back to us anyway.
In this scenario, it wouldn't.
Have money going out.
The contractor
sent that to them.
I don't like it. We need, we need to move this project on. I mean, we need to get them moved back 2 foot. We need to get them lit.
We learned a $12,000 lesson, don't specify a product.
Well,
I'm with you. I don't like it. It's just a bad situation to be in, especially given our history. On the other hand, it is $12,000 on a $12 million project.
And I think I'm going to quote Commissioner Davis from last week when we were talking about the light pole in front of Yaya's. When you have this bigger project, and if this is the biggest thing we run into, so be it. I mean, we did have a lot of different hands in this. We were trying to keep businesses open. HDR was involved, Smoky Hill, the city, we were managing that. So, there were a lot of moving parts. So I don't like this at all. Again, hindsight's always 20/20. We'd all do it differently now. But I do think that it's a solution that we can live with, I guess. So I guess I'd open it up to public comment at this point if anybody has any comment. Norman, that'd be you. You're the only one in here. Gonna have to get you a microphone too, Norman.
Yeah, you need to start sitting up front.
You've been on this subject for so long. Can I comment on it after you've taken action? Because if I hadn't seen a picture up there, it wouldn't have reminded me what's wrong. Where you had that turning issue, the vehicles are turning on a corner, they're cutting across the corner. I've been to New Althena, Illinois, and they got the same problem. I don't think your law enforcement vehicles can make a U-turn now on this 3-lane street. They are putting SUVs, ATVs as law enforcement vehicles because your streets are so narrow. So it's something you need to look at maybe down the road. If you go down to New Althena, Illinois, you'll see what kind of problems they got.
Or make the bollards out of heavy gauge iron and steel. I guarantee you nobody will hit it twice.
Okay, with that, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve change order number 22, authorizing the city manager to approve in an amount not to exceed $37,872.25, $12,624,008, the city portion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve change order number 22, authorizing the city manager to approve in an amount not to exceed $37,872.25, with $12,624.08 being the city's portion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
That passes 4-1. Okay, that will bring us to 7.4.
Item 7.4, resolution number 20-7892, approving the City Commission agenda, general order of business and public participation policy.
Mr. Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This item is the culmination of, I think, 2 recent conversations, and it's been a topic of ongoing conversation for longer than that. We have what we call the agenda, general orders of business, that we attach to the agenda that provide instructions for conduct in city commission meetings. And the question that's been a recurring question is whether signs are permissible in a city commission meeting. And then more recently, you expressed concerns about other decorum concerns that resulting from the public's conduct at the police forum that was held as a study session at Tony's Pizza Event Center. And so legal counsel reported to you last week that they'd done some additional legal research and identified a case out of Louisiana that provided some additional guidance about a lawful way to, I guess my time's up.
There we go.
A lawful way to prohibit signs in the context of a public meeting. And, what we've talked about before is the presumption is that this is a public forum subject to free speech, and so we're very reluctant to limit signs in city commission meetings. So the guidance that was provided was that we could limit, have general guidance regarding or limiting speech on the basis of time, place, and manner if it was content neutral, and that those, if we had any content-based restrictions, those would be highly scrutinized from a legal standpoint. So you discussed at length some of your concerns about conduct at city commission meetings, and instructed staff last week to prepare an amendment to our general orders and our policy to prohibit signs in city commission meetings. So we developed a policy that we tried to be responsive to the concerns that you raised, and I provided a summary in the blue sheet. It prohibits signs, placards, flags, or banners, regardless of size, material, or content. It prohibits audible speaking, whispering, or making sound or noise other than while speaking as a speaker recognized by the mayor. Applauding, whistling, cheering, clapping, or otherwise expressing agreement with the speaker recognized by the mayor. Booing, jeering, taunting, ridiculing, mocking, otherwise expressing disagreement with the speaker recognized by the mayor. Inaudibly mouthing or gesturing messages visible to any other person in the room, kind of that attempt at nonverbal communication. And then the one item that staff added, thinking about how things may play out, was making available or distributing written materials to those in attendance while the meeting is in session. If someone didn't have a sign, presumably they might try to in fact, I think maybe they were referred to as handbills when you discussed it last Monday. Another item that we discussed at length last Monday was T-shirts, and we had some conversation about that in terms of the practicality of content-neutral regulation of T-shirts. There's just so many opportunities for tangential or related messages to be on a T-shirt, and it'd be very subjective whether that's directed at an agenda item or it isn't, so we left that topic alone. There's no direct fiscal impact associated with this item. It is formalized in the resolution, which then adopts by reference the revised general orders of business and public participation policy. And if being a resolution, it only takes one vote, and if you enacted it, it could be in place for the police forum tomorrow evening, which was one of the concerns that you raised. So like any other agenda item, the options we've identified for your consideration are to approve it as approve resolution 2078-92 as presented, approve it with amendments as you deem appropriate, postpone consideration to a specified date and time. You could vote to deny, resulting in the current guidance being in place. And I apologize, that number 5 was supposed to be the last bullet point in that list above. There's a whole story behind that. We couldn't find it back. I thought my edit had failed. Now I found it, so my apologies. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And legal counsel's here to speak in greater specificity about any legal
If I
items.
might, are we adopting the general order of business, or are we adopting a public participation policy? In my mind, general order of business is what gets printed in front of every agenda. That should be a maximum of 1 page and probably bullet points. We need to keep that simple and easy to understand. Public participation policy can go into more detail and is the document, is our policy that sits behind the general order of business and supports it. I think they're two separate things. I think if we have a public participation policy that runs to 2.5 pages, no one's going to read it. It's simply too much. So I would like to see that split into 2 items, and then within the public participation policy itself, I'm okay with most of it, but there are some items in there that I think will be problematic.
And I understand your feedback. In order for, we may need to talk about how to do this if you want it to be in effect for tomorrow evening.
Okay.
But we could either adopt, the way it's presented to you, it is all combined and it's adopted by reference or attachment to the resolution. You could adopt it this evening and instruct us to break it apart as you've described for future consideration. Otherwise, you might be able to give us general direction, but we're going to get into the specifics of it.
Can I ask a question? Describe those, describe the 2.
General order of business is the document that shows up with our agenda. If you pick an agenda back up at the back of the meeting, it explains how we do business. That needs to be fairly simple and straightforward. The public participation policy
this page? Yes.
Yeah, it's on our agenda every week. Public participation policy is the document that lies behind that and supports that. So you don't need all of the detail in the general order of business. We do need it in the public participation policy.
We just have to reference it in the general order of business.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
In the city manager's explanation, I want to go a little further and explain that the format that you see was based upon my recommendation. I'll explain why, not to argue the point, because we ultimately need to get this in the format that you all prefer. So, but what went into that was I would understand the essence of the general order of business, simply the points 1 through 10 that appear at the top of the page that is suggested to you. Previously, we had the single-page description of certain of the various components of your meeting. Part of the reason for the thought behind the integration between the two is that whether you're in citizen forum, whether you're under the consent agenda, whether you're in an executive session, whether you are in your normal business of either conducting public hearings or considering regular agenda items, or if you're in the Tony's Pizza Event Center conducting a forum on a specific issue, are all very different circumstances from the First Amendment analysis. At least enough that it seemed to me to be advisable to address them separately, and in a way that anybody that picked up an agenda at the door would not only know about it, but have it at hand. So that's all by way of the explanation as to what prompted this format as it was recommended to you. So I think now we need to be about the business of figuring out what you find to be the most useful way of communicating the information. And certainly if Commissioner Franz's thought is the collective thought, we will adapt to that.
Just so I'm clear, the general order of business is just the top 1 inch of this first page. It's listed 1 through 10? That could be put on a 8 by 11 sheet, and that would be the entire general order of business. Is that correct? Or-
But then we don't make the rules for the
No.
conduct commission
No, but that
meeting
would be
as a part of
it'd
that.
be a separate document.
Yeah.
It would just
My-
take the top inch, make it a page to itself, and then you have what was it called, public participation policy, which is the 2-page document.
Yeah, just to be clear, what we currently title the general order of business and we currently distribute with the packet is 1 through 10 and some of the topics that have now been integrated into the public participation policy. So the current document that we distribute is a page long and contains not only that list of 10, but some additional discussion of attending a meeting, order of discussion, addressing the commission, citizen forum, consent agenda, executive session, agenda information.
May I ask a question really quick? Could I grab an agenda? Because I always throw away my general order of business page, and I need to look at it as we're discussing the two.
I'm thinking if someone is going to address, if they know ahead of time they want to participate in the meeting, or address the meeting, they would probably not reading the public participation policy.
You know, honestly, I don't think anyone's going to read the public participation policy until there's an issue. It's on
The
the
thing
front of
about
it.
having this, though, is if we have an issue, somebody, whoever the mayor is, can point to this, no matter what venue we're in.
I would agree. I think it's useful to have it all there, and for those that look at these things online before they come to a meeting, then it's all going to be in one place instead of they have to look in two places.
I don't think they read the
for it.
1 page either.
They'll skip to what they
Rod,
are
probably.
interested in reading it.
But I think this covers, covers it all. One question I had is, and I like this because we always ask for name and address, and 99%, or not 99, a big chunk of the time we don't get an address. I like that, where it speaks about, are you a resident of Salina? If you're not a resident of Salina, it doesn't prohibit you from talking?
Correct.
Okay.
And that was the intention of the wording that way, is that it doesn't. I mean, it could be an outside consultant, it could be someone that had an interaction and wanted to approach you about that.
And I've been saying, I think, and state where you're from, so they can either say Salina or Concordia. Like, we had some people that came during the BSL that came in as from outside of town, so I like that.
Actually, currently it says name and address. It doesn't say resident of Salina, and there's a difference between those.
The new one does say.
I know, the new one says resident of Salina and doesn't include address, so.
Which I like better.
I like too.
Yeah, because I wasn't getting addresses, and I don't want to sit here and say.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Where do you live,
That was intentional, I assume, I think everybody's a little more has heightened sensitivity from a privacy standpoint as to addresses.
It's pretty long-standing tradition with communities, but it can have a chilling effect on someone's.
A couple things looking under the proposed policy prohibits, and this is just from sitting here and having to be the one that's going to have to enforce this, is, and I'm not just talking about tomorrow. I mean, I think this is good because we've had issues before. Even if this wasn't for tomorrow, this is something we need to do for future mayors and commissions. But the inaudibly mouthing or gesturing messages visible to other persons in the meeting room, I understand, but I think that's kind of hard to sit up here and to try to maybe police that. I'm not sure that that's one that, I guess I'm looking for my other other commissioners to see what your thoughts are?
I think it's good for the participants to read it. I don't think it's something that you can enforce or control.
I always hate
very
having
well,
something I can't,
but
that's
at
hard to
least
enforce,
If
though.
it's been said to them, I think they,
Well, so somebody says something, you have a member of the audience who does this. You see that.
Yeah.
But are we going to remove him or remove them for doing that?
Well, sometimes people will express, I don't understand, or what does he mean by that? And they may do it with a gesture, not directed at us, but to someone else.
Yeah.
I mean, truly trying to get information.
I think that's one of the sections I think is a little fuzzy.
And for what it's worth, I think the starting point of that, in my mind, was you do have people that try to non-verbally communicate with you, their opposition to what the person at the podium's saying, and that type of communication was what had my attention as being inappropriate. But I don't know
Or
how
could
you
it be-
draw that line.
Well, could it be reworded to, intentionally distracting commissioners by making gestures towards us in a nonverbal
They could be making it
gesture?
towards someone else in the audience too, so I don't know where
I
you
guess
draw that.
that possibly becomes a question of what you're comfortable enforcing. I mean, just being a distraction, an inappropriate distraction in whatever fashion.
well, I think it allows the leeway for the chairman to call it out if he chooses,
sees it
if
and he
he or she
doesn't.
chooses to. I mean, there's a gavel there, and
Then on the second one, audibly speaking is okay, but whispering, I'm not, that gets, because, you could have an attorney and his client whispering out here discussing something. I don't know if that's a real distraction, if they're doing it at the right level.
Understand. May I suggest an approach more from a legal standpoint?
Okay.
I think the first question, again from a legal standpoint, is whether in the collective efforts of the city manager and me, whether as you look at that introductory paragraph where it begins in about the middle, this policy is intended to strike a lawful balance between so on and so forth, and then it makes those 2 points, assuring that meetings of the city commission can occur and so on. I think the first question that we need to be sure is your collective thought, is whether that is a statement of the substantial public interest that we're trying to achieve by this policy in whatever form it ultimately takes. The four levels of analysis that this policy would undergo if ever challenged is one, first of all, is it content neutral? And that's generally going to be the case across the board. We find ourselves in some different environments, and I won't go on too long about that. In some cases, it's just a question of whether those standards are reasonable. If we're found to be in a designated public forum, the analysis then goes on to determine, one, do the time, place, and manner regulations address a substantial governmental interest? And that's the point of that statement being included in whatever policy and in whatever form you ultimately wish to adopt. The next test is whether, if we're in that analysis applying to a designated public forum, is whether the restrictions are narrowly tailored to meet that substantial interest. And lastly, whether there are ample alternatives for communication. And a lot of the language and the inclusion of the description of the various formats in which you might be meeting from time to time, and the manner in which individuals are allowed to speak, either address you verbally or provide written information. The reason for trying to go through that in the same document is to emphasize that that's if it's your choice, that is the means of communication that you have chosen for how you wish to conduct your meeting. It will be through verbal discourse or the distribution of written information. And that then sets the stage for moving on to, okay, now that we've provided those channels of communication and told you what we believe the interests to be in the conduct of the meeting, what is in conflict with that and can be regulated as to time, place, and manner. And that's what brings us to the suggested 1 through 6 that do need to be as specific as you wish to make them, but they do need to be yours. So there's no pride in authorship in trying to capture or anticipate exactly your preferences in 1 through 6.
Yeah, I appreciate your paragraph there at the end of the introductions. I think that basically states exactly the wording that I might even want to use tomorrow. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do is what you state there. Then I go back to the 6 bullet points, as I'll call them, and I'm trying to decide how I or someone else as a mayor would actually be able to enforce those. And that's why I think if somebody's audibly speaking and, somebody says, makes a comment and they audibly say, well, that's, bull, whatever, and then that's being disruptive. Or if somebody starts making noises or whatever, distracting not only from the commission but from the others. I think if somebody's trying to whisper, they're trying to not be disruptive, and I guess that would be the one that I would, because I think there's a point in a time where somebody may need to be talking to whoever they're sitting next to, and if it's not being done at such an audible as to be disruptive, I'm probably okay with that. But I'm just 1 vote out of 5, so.
Well, and I think you make a good point, because it basically, that's kind of referenced again in 3 and 4, the, kind of aggressive affirmative and aggressive negative. I mean, I think that it kind of falls in that if somebody's, like you say, if they shout, that's bull, that, so, I agree.
And I think the intent to be distractive, that's distracting. Thank you. Could be included either 3 or 4 because those 2 imply that their comments are directed towards the speaker.
Or loud enough to.
But they could just be trying to be generally disruptive, or they may be trying to distract us. And there are times when people who are, if 2 people are going to come for comments, they may say, "Oh, you're going to talk about that? Okay, I won't mention that to save time. I'll talk about this." Yeah. And usually people will do that at a very low voice.
And I need something that, again, is fair to everyone. If Martha Tasker's sitting out here with somebody from HDR, and we're discussing something, and Martha leans over, I'm going, Martha, now stop that. I'm not a kindergarten teacher. I'm not going to, I don't want to get into that. So, I think that's just going a little far. That's just my opinion. Other than that, I can live with everything else.
Yeah, I think in the introduction, the sentence that starts, this policy is intended to strike a lawful, that is very important, and it'd be nice if that was a separate paragraph or even bolded, because that's really the intent of what this whole policy is.
Right.
To conduct business, let it be fair, and protect individual rights. The paragraph on public hearings and regular agenda items, that might want to be broken in 2. That's a long paragraph to get through, even knowing, being familiar with the operation, it's a long paragraph.
That was a question that I wondered about as we prepared it, yes. It becomes a little duplicative if it's split, but on balance, that was the question in my mind as well.
Could you not have a section that address the things that are generally applicable and then have a short section for public hearings for the things that are different than the general applicability? And if there's something on regular agenda items that's different from general applicability, address those. That way you wouldn't have to be as duplicative. I don't know, question. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Commissioner Davis, I think.
And the way you phrase those, were you going to put those with the general order of?
No, I'm just saying that the public hearings and regular agenda items, as you go through that, there's some repetition because you talk about things in public hearings. This is a requirement, and then you talk about under regular agenda. This is also, it's the same requirement, and it just seems like if you consolidate the things that are the same or similar, and then talk about the exceptions primarily for the public hearing, I think, you could condense that a little bit. I don't know.
It's an understandable question. It's, as we worked on it, it's one of the questions we deliberated upon as well, because the approach was attempting to identify for folks what context are they in. And if you're looking at that section on each of those contexts, the idea was that you could pretty well tell what was going to happen. And to your point, I understand there is some repetition in order to do that, but I thought if you make people go to different places to see what's happening in that context, I think it's the classic drafting dilemma on which is better.
Unless you'd have a separate section that just describes recognition of citizens at the podium.
Well,
Because the only difference is, citizens forum, it's 5 minutes. During an agenda item, it's 3 minutes.
Well, if we're looking for a way to break it up into paragraphs without wholesale editing it, where it starts upon recognition by the mayor, at least seems like a logical break point between kind of the mechanics, and then now that you're at the podium, here's what you're supposed to do. I could defend those as standalone paragraphs, but it doesn't. It's not the redraft that Commissioner France described.
Well, it would shorten the paragraph on public hearings. It would shorten the paragraph on limited forum, or anywhere where a citizen can speak. Those rules of basically what to do when you're at the podium, or how to be recognized. The only difference is the time limit, and even that can change depending on the topic.
It's always easy to be the editor and not the writer. So,
amen.
It's a little longer than I would probably make it, but I think the content is what we want. If we could do away with whispering, I would be real happy with the document and could probably live with it. I think it meets what we want and gets us a lot closer to where we need to be. And if we have to massage this down the road, we can. But I don't.
Well,
I think it's
number 5. I think we need to look at is
Right, number 2 and number 5.
Number 2 and 5, and drop those.
Yeah, because
strike whispering and strike number 5 altogether.
Yeah, because I think that both of those, if they're loud or overt enough to be distracting, really fall under
and I think
3 and 4.
Right, the
Conning, ridiculous,
mocking. I did have one.
Or any distracting.
It does say, or otherwise expressing disagreement with the speaker recognized by the mayor, or expressing agreement, and that does kind of cover the inaudible stuff.
But it doesn't they would say I wasn't directing it at the speaker. Just any behavior that's distracting.
With speaker or
period. If they get up and start dancing in the seat, that's going to be distracting. And they'd say, well, there's nothing in here that says that I can't dance. I wasn't directing it at the speaker. I wasn't disagreeing with anybody. I just felt
and it could be
like dancing.
And here's what and I don't know how you want to reword this, Mr. Bingston, but booing, jeering, taunting, blah, blah, otherwise expressing disagreement with, because it could not only be a speaker, it could be a commissioner, or it could be our legal counsel. Just saying. It's probably the deputy city manager. But I think that just needs to be in general, maybe. Is that what you're trying to say, Commissioner Davis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I had, again, we can make this however you wish. I had presumed that as we look to you for recognition, even in our roles, that we have been recognized by you.
Including other commissioners then?
Well, I'm not arguing the point again, I was just explaining where
I
that
see what you're
came
saying.
from.
You're saying,
I was trying to make it shorter.
yeah. I see where you're coming from. I was just thinking that.
But if
yeah.
we want to specify commissioners, that's
I'm just thinking
easily
that,
done.
Commissioner Davis could say something and could be getting, and then I guess it would be up to me, because I probably have called on you to speak, I guess.
Well, it's very easy.
Could we strike recognized by the mayor and just agreement with a speaker or disagreement with a speaker?
Okay, because.
Or a participant, I don't know.
Right now, the way this is, there would be nothing that would keep a group of people in any of our meetings standing up, and I'm just going to use this as an example, and I apologize. Don't defund the police. Don't defund the police. You get 20 people standing up cheering that out loud, and there's nothing in here that.
They haven't been recognized by the mayor to speak.
No, but you see, that's expressing, I take it all that refers to expressing disagreement with the speaker. But if they're doing it just in between speakers, when no one's at the podium.
Well, that's actually number two.
That's number two?
That's what.
Or making sound noise other than.
Okay, that would be number two. So take out whispering.
As long as they're not whispering in the background.
Just no whispering.
Okay.
We are getting engaged in wordsmithing here, and I think what we need to do is adopt this thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And let's go back and let the staff take some of our comments and redraft it, hopefully on one page,
Do you have an opinion about font size?
With one more condition, just one more comment I have, and it's a top sentence top line on the third page. And it says, public interest outlined above, no person before, during, or after the meeting shall in the meeting room engage in these. Before, during, or after covers 24 hours a day.
In the meeting room.
No, it says before, during, or after the scheduled meeting.
Shall in
the meeting room. So if we recess, nobody in this room can talk. If we go into executive session, nobody in this room can talk because the meeting's still in progress. And before the meeting, they have to leave the room before they're allowed to talk. I'm just, I think that it reads like it's extremely stringent. Now, I kind of get where you're going to. If everybody's out there chittering and it's hard to get the meeting started, that's something we want to avoid.
Yeah, and I certainly do understand the point. And as we worked on that, and I can't speak for the city manager, but I suppose it comes down to the question of, as you conduct your meeting, are you concerned about anything before or after, or is it just from the point in time that you convene until you?
I'd welcome any other comments on that.
Question.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking that this would apply to while the meeting was in progress, in session.
Yeah. But then before the meeting.
What goes on 30 minutes before a meeting in this room, not as well, just because I've probably never seen any raucous behavior in here before a meeting. But if people were walking around with signs at 3:30, well, the signs would have to be gone by 4 o'clock. Now, when it says no signs in the meeting room, does that imply during the time the meeting's in session, or is this room considered sacred ground and never ever?
Well, other than what's specified here, there is no other provision. So this was intended that you weren't running a gauntlet of signs to get to the dais or to leave the meeting, that the expectation was signs were not a form of communication. I mean, I understand, you go, when we get back to the habit of adjourning an executive session, and I don't think the intention was that people can't talk amongst themselves while they're out here, but I guess I was guilty of assuming that a lot of this other prohibitions were in recognition of someone else having the floor. And so, while the meeting's not in session, you don't have someone having the floor, but,
Yeah, I think that can be interpreted different ways. I'm not sure, because does this mean that if Norman comes up to speak to me after the meeting, he has to wait till we get in the hallway? I mean, I'm just trying to interpret that. I don't.
Well, if he's not applauding or jeering, I mean, doesn't, I guess at that time the meeting is.
It doesn't.
As long as you recognize him, he's okay. I don't mean to be.
I don't. I just think, look, I think we need to approve it and maybe massage it as we move forward.
Ask for some wordsmithing as we go on, because I think there are things in there that need to be.
I think.
And just so that I can put it in your ear, speaking of wordsmithing, because that's all it is. Under citizen forum and under public hearings and regular agenda items, when a speaker is recognized by the mayor, the language, the speaker must confirm whether he or she is a resident of Salina. To me, that reads as if I must be a resident of Salina in order to speak. So I would just suggest something that the speaker should state his or her name and city of residence, just so we know, because otherwise I'm afraid that we would, that would read that somebody, like you said, from Beloit, from Concordia, wouldn't.
Part of that was a byproduct raises a good question. Would you be concerned at all about that in the citizen forum context? Or does it matter of their place of residence?
Matter to me. I mean, depending on their topic, I mean, it might be nice to know that someone in Ellsworth who drives over here has found something here that they really think we need to address.
Okay. Does that work for everybody in the citizen forum context as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I make a run at inventorying what I think we said we're going to edit so far? So the references to whether they are a resident will be edited to ask them to state their city of residence. The section forms of communication not allowed in the meeting room, whispering will be struck. Did we think it was a useful edit to strike recognized by the mayor and just other than while speaking as a speaker in items 2 and 3 and 4, and then striking 5 altogether?
I'm not sure what you're saying there.
I would keep
2, 3, and 4. The concern was with clarity about whether you've been recognized by the mayor, and my suggestion was you could strike recognized by the mayor, and the expectation is your opportunity to speak is as a speaker. You don't interrupt another speaker, essentially.
I guess the only reason I would keep it is that it implies that unless you've been recognized by the mayor, you shouldn't be speaking out loud.
Yeah. So leave it in?
Yeah.
Okay, and then strike 5 altogether?
I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then see what we can do about clarifying the before and after the meeting conduct.
Okay, now, number 2 still does not include quiet, distracting activity.
Right.
It's taking, I think, what number 5 was meant to cover.
Right.
And adding it to something, it's...
How about you take, I don't know if that's true, booing, jeering, taunting, gesturing,
Yeah.
ridiculing, mocking, can you add that up there?
I just put gesturing in.
Well, but I think, the point that was made earlier is if you just have a natural reaction, whether it's cocking your head or raising your arms, that's in agreement or disagreement, when what you're really trying to discourage is intentionally being distracting with nonverbal communication, aren't you?
Yeah.
So if that's the intent, then we probably need to reword 5.
Or you could just add distracting gesturing to both of those.
But I think it was to your prior point, it may not be an agreement or disagreement. It may just be, if you want to retain that, I think it would be inaudibly mouthing or gesturing in a manner deemed to be distracting to other persons in the meeting room.
I like that.
Okay. That's fine.
Inaudibly mouthing or gesturing in a manner deemed to be distracting to other persons in the meeting room.
Yep.
I mean, and just for an overview, what we're trying to do is help out the presiding officer of the meeting too, because we can point to our expectations of the behavior. So, like Commissioner France said, if we have to do some tweaks to the wording, I think you're definitely on the right path.
And to that end, I think it was radio this morning, but there's already communication that they can't do this and you need to boo and jeer tomorrow. So there's a whole philosophical argument to be made that it's a free speech issue, so plan to jeer tomorrow. Just to forewarn you.
I'm looking at Officer Goliath over there. What kind of muscle do we have to back that up when the mayor reaches his threshold and is like, I mean, do we just adjourn? I mean,
the first option is you
Just adjourn
can
the meeting.
adjourn the meeting. You can,
Okay.
you can take a recess and let things simmer down. Depend if it's an individual, we will have police presence there, and you can ask for them to be removed. There's instances in other communities where that does not go well. It may require physical confrontation, or you could adjourn the meeting.
So you want a motion and a vote to adopt this, at least on a...
Yes.
Mayor, if I may I make 2 hopefully quick suggestions? To address Commissioner Franz's point, understandably, about the before, during, and after. Would it help there where it now says no person before, during, after, if we said no member of the public present before, during, or after the scheduled meeting? That would seem to possibly emphasize that it is a matter of a person who is present at the meeting place.
I didn't see that as the problem. I see the before, during, and after as the problem. That's pretty all-encompassing in terms of time frame.
What you're saying is while we're in executive session, someone couldn't sit out here and audibly speak, right?
Yeah. And as long as they're not shouting through the door or hammering on a door, it's not a problem.
Right.
Okay. The other reason for asking to possibly add that is that it occurs to me as we're speaking that in that you all are persons, I suppose if someone wanted to be difficult, they could argue that the American flag, the state flag, and the flag of the city of Salina, if exhibited, was contrary to subpoint 1. If it were referred to as a member of the public present, and I don't know if we want to take it down to during the meeting, but that would be one way to make sure that it was clear that it was anyone who was
I get
a member
your
of the
point.
public.
We could certainly take it down to during and see if that works. If it doesn't
Before,
work, we
during,
could
or
double
after the
back.
scheduled meeting shall be in the meeting room engaged in any form.
And frankly, in the, arguing the legal points, I suppose, but if it works to bring the focus down to during the meeting, and there are ultimately problems beyond that, we at least have narrowly tailored it as we are to do, in an effort to focus on strictly the meeting time. If we have problems beyond that, then on that basis, it can certainly be expanded.
Let's leave it for now, and we'll, I guess.
Has behavior or speaking before or after a meeting ever been a problem?
But it deals with the other stuff too, below.
Yeah, the thing that probably got my attention is signs. If you're going to ban signs,
Because it deals with everything else below it. I don't know.
but beyond that, I'm not aware of one, a problem.
So you're saying that's the phrase that bans signs from the meeting room before the meeting?
You're right.
Right.
That's what they're saying.
This is going to be a real ticky-tack point, but since this is not our room exclusively, what's the time before our meeting that this is considered the city commission chamber, and what's the time after our meeting that it's considered the city commission chamber?
I was in contact with the county, and we did, county administrator, we agreed that anything out in the hallway or out on the site probably was a building authority matter, but I don't know that we have a reservation block, because we reserve it to allow for prep time in advance, but I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule.
So could someone come in here at 2 in the afternoon and have a rally? It's before the meeting, but our meeting doesn't start till 4.
Independent of all this, they would have to have we wouldn't give them a reservation for that, I don't think. So they'd be told they didn't have a
This room is
reservation.
technically usually, it's not always locked, but it's off limits if there's not a meeting in here.
Correct.
Actually, yeah, it's locked,
Yeah, it
generally.
is locked?
Yep.
Okay.
And it gets open.
If it's reserved for our use on Monday afternoons, then.
Yeah, there may be some transition time, but it's not open continuously.
And that's significant in terms of this room not being a traditional public forum. It is subject to whatever you declare it to be during your meeting time.
Do we have what we need to make a motion with amendments?
If I combine Mr. Bankston's suggestion, what we might be able to get away with, what might be helpful maybe, is to assure fulfillment of the substantial public interest outlined above, no member of the public during the scheduled meeting shall, and then could we, where I was headed, that at least narrows it down to the meeting, and I was going to suggest adding language to number 1, possessing, placing, or displaying banners before, during, or after the meeting. I mean, if we want to zero in on a particular action and make the rest permissible, could we clarify 1 in that way?
Oh, certainly, yes. I think it may take a little restructuring of that section, but that's all right.
I don't know if that's taking you somewhere you don't want to go as a governing body.
I mean, we could address number 1 first in that before, during, or after, and then articulate the others in relation to during.
Is that
Deal?
Collectively, is that something the governing body would like us to do?
Yeah, it makes it very clear.
The last point, if I may make a request, and I'll do some editing myself, I considered this earlier, truly was trying to not make it unnecessarily long or redundant, but as we have talked and as we have heard some of the public response to even the suggestion that you might be limiting certain of these activities, if you look at under that section at the top of the 3rd page, the forms of communications or expression not allowed in the meeting room, the last full line of that introduction where it says forms of communication or expression not allowed in the meeting room include, if you look at forms of communication or expression and stop at that point, there is what I think might be a better connecting link between the substantial public interest that we're trying to achieve and why it is the articulated exceptions are of concern, is if we could interject, where it now says forms of communication of expression, and then interject found by the city commission to be in conflict with the substantial public interests outlined above, and therefore not allowed in the meeting room include. So that we're, again, it's a little longer, but it ties it back all the more to the substantial interest.
That sounds better.
Thank you.
Can we pass this with the amendments we have and then try it on for size and schedule a review in another week or two?
I'm going to ask legal counsel to, or city manager to give us what you have written down as the amendments.
I'll volunteer to give that a try.
Because then we're going to make perhaps a motion to approve with amendments, and then we won't have to list them if.
So my understanding of the proposed amendments are to amend references to a speaker confirming whether he or she is a resident of Salina to the speaker must indicate their city of residence. In both instances that occurs. That within the forms of communication or expression not allowed in the meeting section, we're going to reformat that to separate out possessing, placing, displaying a sign, placard, flag, or banner, regardless of its size, the material of which it's made, or its written graphic or symbolic content to be prohibited before, during, and after the meeting. We'll reformat the remainder of that section to only be applicable during the meeting, and we will amend the last sentence of that currently first paragraph. Consequently, forms of communication or expression, and Greg, your wording was deemed to
found by the city commission to be in conflict with the substantial public interests outlined above, and therefore not allowed in the meeting room include.
And then the second point will be amended by striking reference to whispering. And the fifth item will be amended to read inaudibly mouthing or gesturing in a manner deemed to be distracting to other persons in the meeting room. And the only other one that we talked about is breaking the public hearings and regular agenda items into two paragraphs, with the second paragraph starting with upon recognition by the mayor, the speaker must.
Good place to start.
That's fine. Okay.
Okay,
would somebody like to make a motion?
I move we approve Resolution 20-7892 with amendments as were just read.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 20-7892 with amendments as previously discussed. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
That passes 4-1. Okay. Okay, do we have any other business? If not, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
A motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I will see everyone tomorrow at Tony's Pizza Event Center. It begins at 7 o'clock. Okay, thank you.